Can Andy Dalton send his old Cincinnati Bengals team to 0-4? And can Josh Allen continue his scorching start to the NFL season against the formidable Baltimore Ravens team? The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show starts now.
It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 4 in the NFL is officially here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, and this is the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. So from the primetime matchup of the Bills and the Ravens to the big 425 matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers, plus you have a bunch of 1 p.m. games, including the Cincinnati Bengals and Carolina Panthers. Andy Dalton, an old friend over there in Cincinnati. He's playing for the Panthers now, and he's looking to send his old team to 0-4. We're going to get into game-by-game keys to victory, predictions, and so much more from our local experts across our network to make you the most informed fan for game day. Crazy, we're almost a month into the NFL season, and we have everything you need to know about each and every single game. So let's start off in Carolina, where Andy Dalton will be looking to send his old team to 0-4. And we have Jake Lisco of Locked On Bengals, as well as Julian Council of Locked On Panthers, taking you through everything you need to know about the game.
Back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Bengals, I'm Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers. He's Jake Lisco, one of the two hosts of Locked On Bengals. It's a crossover Thursday here presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Panthers, Bengals, week 4. Panthers 1-2. Andy Dalton inserted at quarterback. The Bengals surprisingly 0-3, but I still feel like this is a Bengals team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. I know they got to get things done defensively, figure that out, get healthy. I'm not going to write them off. I mean, obviously, Pittsburgh, who's 3-0, is not going to lose more than 8 games, as Mike Tomlin refuses to ever have a losing season. So, you know, you got to at least get to 9-10 to be able to catch up with them. And then the Ravens haven't looked the best so far. And Cleveland, yikes, that's a problem. So there's 2 teams you got to catch up to. If we're really thinking about it, Jake. Just thinking positive vibes for Bengal fans, as I do really enjoy watching Joe Burrow all the way back his time at LSU. I'm always going to be a fan of his. And hopefully entertainment sake, just for like football. Like someone's got to stop Mahomes and the Chiefs. And it's been the Bengals. Burrowhead Stadium, never forget. So looking at this game on Sunday. Yeah, please forget. Yes, I mean, a couple weeks ago it was tough. Looking at this game on Sunday, Bengals I last saw were, I think, what I say, a 4.5-point favorite in this game. Yep. What are the 3 things that they have to do in order to come out with their first win of the season on the road against where I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of Bengals fans here in Charlotte?
I'll say tongue-in-cheek, get a single, 1, this many, if you're watching on YouTube's stops on defense. That would be a start. And like I said, that starts up front. So finding a way to get pressure, to confuse Andy Dalton. We have seen him in Cincinnati get confused in the past, drop his eyes, become a runner, break down the throwing mechanics in the pocket when what he wants isn't there. Find a way to get him uncomfortable. That starts up front. And most of these keys are on the defensive side of the ball to me. Stopping the run, forcing the Panthers into situations that are not 3rd and 1 or 3rd and short, and making it actually challenging for the Panthers to convert is what I'm looking for from this defense. The Washington Commanders were able to stay ahead of the chains the entire game. And that's probably number 2, which goes into getting some of those stops on 1st and 2nd down, stringing plays together, containing the run game, which I actually did a decent job of on 1st downs against the Commanders, perhaps to their detriment in pass defense though. Right. And so Andy Dalton not presenting the threat as a scrambler that Jaden Daniels is maybe makes their job a little bit easier this week. And last, it's continue what you have working on offense. Continue to protect well. The Panthers don't look like a team that should be able to heat you up too much as a passer. They don't have the best pass rush in the NFL. You should be able to take advantage of matchups throughout this secondary. You should be able to run the ball this week. So continue to look like the offense that you should be. And that should lead to another highly productive day for this offense. I would say something about the red zone and nitpick there. Finish off your drives in the red zone. That has been an issue for the Bengals this year. That could arguably be one of the reasons they're at 0-3 right now. But it's continue what you're doing on offense and find some kind of answer on defense. That's the basic gist of it. How do your 3 keys for the Panthers to win this game line up with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and this is actually wasn't one of my keys, but that's a good point you bring up there about the Panthers pass rush. It is the worst in the NFL. It was the worst in the NFL last year, and I think it's going to be the worst all season long. And now there was some updates on Wednesday from Dave Canales about potentially getting some guys back who are currently on IR or on PUP or on the non-football injury list, and a couple of their pass rushers are, and they're hoping that potentially they can get Amari Barno, who tore his ACL week 16 last year, back soon. They're hoping that their free agent signing DJ Wooden, who they signed actually before Jadeveon Clowney, can come back in the near future. And they're going to absolutely need some of these guys who have been out on PUP and on the IR to come back and help them out in the pass rush. So that's going to be really the first test for the Panthers against a team that has a really high-level passing game to go up against. So that's something I'm certainly concerned about if Joe Burrow has plenty of time to sit back there in the pocket and deliver the ball. Because on Sunday against Gardner Minshew, they were able to be fine as they were able to hold back in the back end, as really it's just Devontae Adams had to worry about. As far as the 3 things I'm looking at in this game, kind of goes back to what I alluded to earlier. You got to get somebody outside of Deontay Johnson to step up at wide receiver. Chuba Hubbard was outstanding in a run game last week. Expect him to have success again on the ground. Expect Deontay Johnson to be able to make some of his plays, but somebody has got to step up in the absence of Adam Thielen, not just on Sunday, but in the next 3 weeks moving forward. And Xavier Lee gets the guy that everyone here is going to be looking to see. Last week, got a nice running catch for 35 yards. He has the explosion that led him to be a first-round pick here in Carolina. It led him to have a breakout season last year at South Carolina. So everyone's trying to see what he can provide. Jonathan Mingo, great opportunity. Someone who really played well in the slot back in college at Ole Miss, who's really struggled playing the Z position here in the NFL. So we'll see what he's able to provide for them on Sunday. Second thing we're looking at, the run defense. I get it. The Bengals have not been dedicated to running the ball. They wanted to run the ball on Monday night, couldn't get a stop. If they're able to get ahead early with the passing offense, run the ball effectively as well, they can start leaning on the Panthers, where I do think that defensively they'll probably get more stops than they got last week. Like, the Panthers are not going to score on every possession. I'm pretty sure about that, Jake. Maybe they do, but I do not think that's going to be the case in this game on Sunday. So got to be able to stop the run. And number 3, they got to match the Bengals' desperation. History shows that teams that start off 0-2 do not make the playoffs. I feel like it's kind of a bogus stat, because at some point in time with the expanded playoff, more of these teams are going to make it. I know Cincinnati is one of those teams in recent memory. And what's really the difference between being 0-2 and then, like, all of a sudden being 2-2? Like, if you're 2-0, then you're 2, and like, it's basically the same thing. So Cincinnati's obviously going to want to win this game. It's going to match their desperation and energy in this game on Sunday if they're going to be able to come out on top in this game against the Bengals. So we'll see how it plays out, Jake.
Yeah, I think that desperation only gets you so far. At some point, you also need to execute. They were pretty desperate last week as well, again, against a bad team, and they couldn't get it done. They were desperate against the Chiefs, and they got up for that game and couldn't get it done. So at some point, you have to execute, obviously. But again, I think they're looking at this weekend. I know you said it's a 4.5-point spread. Now that's probably good news for the Bengals. They have been 7+ point favorites twice and lost straight up in both of those games in this young season. I think this game opened around 7.5, or was it 7.5 before week 3's action, has come down considerably. So the Vegas odds makers see this as a tighter game with the emergence of Andy Dalton and the disintegration of the Bengals defense on Monday Night Football. And we'll see how that plays out. But for both of these teams, the vibe I'm getting from this conversation is whoever controls the game early, can get that early stop, can get that early lead, will make things a lot harder on the other team. And with the Bengals defense being in the state it is, I find that I'm going to be saying that a lot this year, I think, where in previous years I would have felt fine with them going toe-to-toe and being in a back-and-forth game. At this point, if the Bengals can't make the Panthers one-dimensional, then I worry about their ability to get a stop at any point throughout the game.
Jake and Julian are great, and for more on Jake and Julian, check them out over at Locked On Bengals and at Locked On Panthers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now let's move to a big game in the NFC North between the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota looking to continue their scorching start to the season. They've been dominant, but the Green Bay Packers, without Jordan Love last week, were able to take down the Tennessee Titans, and they're going to hope to do the same to Minnesota this week. So we have Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers and Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings diving into the rivalry and what it could be this week.
Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. Peter Bukowski, Locked On Packers. Luke, this is a game where right now the Packers 2.5-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel. That look-ahead line was 3, but that was before the Vikings trounced the Texans. So if you're going to put this on one or two keys for the Vikings, what are they?
I think especially if it's Jordan Love, assuming that it's Jordan Love and that he's wearing a knee brace and that that you're not going to get 100% mobility, getting hits on him early and often is going to be huge. And disrupting that rhythm is going to be huge. I know the Packers are pretty happy with what's going on at the offensive line.
Yeah.
But if there's anybody to attack, then they're going to find a way to isolate that person, get the one-on-one matchup that they like, and they're going to try to find that. And then it's the same thing that I've been saying for like 2 years about the Vikings now. Sam Darnold has been just begging for a horrible turnover for like 3 weeks, and there have been some turnovers, but it's like we've gotten away with murder a couple times, and you have to either stop doing that or keep getting away with it. So it's a turnover thing. If the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell are 20-0, if they win or tie the turnover battle, they've never lost if they win or tie the turnover battle in the last 2 years and change. So if they can keep that up and just play normal down-to-down football, we've now seen that they can go toe-to-toe with the best. But it has to stay normal. You can't have muffed punts, weird Sam Darnold turnovers that give the Packers the ball on their own 20-yard or on the Vikings 20-yard line and then like put you in a hole. You cannot have it.
How long have you been the Vikings host?
2018. So this is my 7th season.
How many Vikings games have you watched where they've just been normal?
One, and it was last week. They were normal and they won 34-7. Like, please just be normal. But you know,
I feel like
funny.
every time we do this, I feel like you're just like, just please be normal. You're like
be normal.
You're like the person at the family party, like, please just don't embarrass me. Like, please don't.
Please just be normal.
Yeah.
When they go on primetime, I am. It's like, please God, nobody watch. But it's funny because when I joined Locked On, it was Kirk Cousins' first season. So I've never covered the Vikings in a non-Kirk Cousins season. The differences feel like you can feel the difference, and then you turn on the Falcons and you're like, that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years.
so
it is different. But
that is, and I love that as a key because the Packers lead the NFL in turnovers through 3 weeks.
That's going to be huge then. Yeah.
And so
it's pressure and turnovers.
No one has created turnovers at a higher clip. They have as many interceptions already through 3 weeks as they had in the entirety of last season, including a pick six last week from Jair Alexander, where they did nothing special. Will Levis just had a brain fart and threw it to Jair Alexander the other way.
He just like jumped one, right?
It was just like, well, first of all, it was like the worst. There's like the dumbest. I hate the all stop at 5 yards.
Yeah, it's like a super late out that he tried to rifle in there that like you get away with, and
it was just basic zone coverage. But he just plotted on it and went the other way. So, but like Xavier McKinney has made a couple where he's ranging over from the deep middle on throws that like really he shouldn't get to, but because he's just very smart, the ways that Harrison Smith makes plays in the middle of the field where you're just like, how did he get to that ball? I don't understand like how he did that. For me, it is, you have to win on the pass against early downs. Win on early downs against the pass, because this has been a team. I went and looked into the numbers, and I expected to see, okay, Aaron Jones, they're 5th in EPA per rush. They're 5th in success rate on running downs, on running plays. But if you take away garbage time, they're 20th in EPA per rush. They've been really good at the end of these games.
Yeah, they've been closing out those games with it.
Which is a skill. Like the Ravens wish they could be that good at the end of these games, closing out these football games, because they can't stop screwing these things up late. But it's been that they've
very refreshing. Boy, the last couple of years of that were bad.
Well, yeah. Well, Alexander Mattison, it turns out, is just like not good. He's just not it. But they've been throwing it at a higher rate on early downs this year than last year, which seemed impossible to me. And
Kevin O'Connell, baby, loves it.
They've been successful doing it, and so
he's
that's
a 7-on-7 coordinator.
You have to get that early pressure, first down, create a negative, or at least just create an incompletion. And then if you can get to that 3rd and long, let's see Sam Darnold convert 3rd and longs on a consistent basis. That's got to be the goal. And I think they can do it with interior pressure at Ingram. I'm kind of surprised they have not come up with better solutions to what's going on there.
Yeah, that's so the pressure thing. I wanted to get into that because that's probably the biggest weakness on the offense is that interior line. It's been Ingram, it's been Bradbury. Blake Brandel has also had his fair share, but it's been mostly teams are attacking those other two guys. Right. The thing is, in the run, those guys have been really absolute maulers. Yeah. Holy moly, those guys have been maulers. And the Vikings have. They do have Dalton Reisner in the building. He's on IR right now, and they had him, and they said he was going to like kind of push these guys, but it never really was serious, even when he was healthy, and then he got hurt, and it kind of was a moot point.
Well, that's what happens to a guy you add in August. Like those guys just usually can't move the needle the way you would like them to if you need them to.
I mean, yeah, and he was starting by the end of the year last year when they traded Ezra Cleveland away, but they signed him as a backup. They signed him with like roster bonus, like they weren't even sure if he was going to make the team. But they were like, he's here to like push the guards and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, Ingram and Bradbury have been the guys that, they're trying to the other teams are trying to isolate with the one-on-one. We saw Daniil Hunter, lining up over the center, like on third downs, that kind of thing to get that interior pressure. Pressure on the tackles has been impossible. Nick Bosa got a couple on Christian Darrisaw, and I think you kind of just have to be Nick Bosa. Otherwise Darrisaw on Will Anderson totally smoked him. On Hunter got a couple on him. That was pretty fun because those guys know each other so well. But if you're gonna get pressure, it has to be up the middle. So it has to be, your Devontae Wyatt or whoever it is that you're gonna be like the guy that gets pressure up the middle, or it has to be like
Kenny Clark,
Rashawn Gary,
Bradbury. We've seen that before.
Yeah. Or it has to be like Rashawn Gary moving the inside on third down, that kind of thing. But getting that pressure or preventing that pressure, finding a way to keep Bradbury and Ingram on a double team with each other so they can help each other out is going to be really crucial for the Vikings protection schemes.
One thing that the Packers have done that has become one of the in vogue things to do, and you will see the Vikings do this, and the Mike Zimmer did this occasionally too, is they will try to mess with your protection rules where they are going to put three guys on one side.
Sure.
Where you don't have enough, and then you've got 3 for 3, and then you've got one on the other side, just Rashawn Gary. So you can't slide protections to Rashawn Gary.
Yeah.
But then the cool thing is now you walk up a linebacker, and Brian Flores does this too. You walk up a linebacker, it looks like 5-on-5. You think you have this mapped up, and then you have the other linebacker comes looping in around. So it almost becomes like a cross dog, and it's really tough for teams to handle that. We saw Jeff Hafley go deep in his bag against the Titans in the second half when they knew they had to pass. And came up with some really cool stuff, like Edgerrin Cooper shot out of a cannon on some of these. And so they're certainly going to do some things to try and stress the Vikings offensive line. I think it's going to be a cool chess match in that way. You want to make a prediction?
I don't, but I will if you need me to. I can name it. It's 27-24. I don't know.
We don't know what we're gonna see from Jordan Love if he's going to be able to play. I think that's what makes this really tough.
It does.
And so I think this is going to be a really good football game. I'll pick the Packers just because you picked the Vikings. I don't have a strong lean on this. I was certainly much more confident they were going to beat the Titans last year or last week and the Colts before that. So let's have a great game. And let's disagree a little bit more the next time we do this. Sound good?
Yeah, we'll argue a little more. I like what you said at the beginning, though, that this might be the two best teams in the NFC. Looking at the way the Falcons are struggling, the way the Lions have been up and down, like this might be the two best teams in the NFC. Nobody had that on their bingo card. So yeah, let's go have a game.
Luke and Peter with some great insight on those two teams. And for more on Luke, more on Peter, check them both out over at Locked On Vikings for Luke and Locked On Packers for Peter, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Another divisional matchup, this time going to Atlanta. The NFC South New Orleans Saints suffered a tough defeat last week after their great 2-week stretch to start the season. They'll look to bounce back against an Atlanta Falcons team that's coming off a tough primetime defeat to the Kansas City Chiefs. So Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons to get you ready for the big NFC South matchup.
Aaron Freeman here of Locked On Falcons, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints here for a crossover Thursday, which is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL, and you can win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Ross, we are talking about the things that these teams have to do in order to win football games, also known as keys to victory. And what are 3 that you think the New Orleans Saints have to do this Sunday to emerge with a win?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is find a way to run the football. And a good way to do that is to get Taysom Hill involved a bunch. Taysom has been the kind of Falcons kryptonite and everything at times. He should be back and healthy. So I think that he has to play a big role in getting that run game going. They're gonna have to they're gonna have to get after Kirk Cousins with the pass rush as well. Keep him uncomfortable. Keep him making some bad decisions or force him into making some bad decisions if they can. And then lastly, number 3 for me is generate explosive plays on offense, while of course limiting them on defense. New Orleans has done a good job of both of those things. In some cases, when they haven't, that's when they've lost.
Yeah, for me, the Falcons, it's the first thing is someone's got to control the line of scrimmage in this game, and hopefully it's the Atlanta Falcons that do that on either side of the ball with establishing a run, stopping the run game, and making one of these teams play in a way left-handed that they don't want to necessarily play. And then the second thing to me is don't be a bozo, referring to Kirk Cousins, right? Don't turn the ball over. Don't do the bozo stuff that Kirk Cousins, the chaos that Kirk Cousins occasionally has in this matchup. And then the third thing is I want to see if this coaching staff can make the adjustments to get better play in some of these areas of deficiency that we discussed on today's episode. But
that's
Ross,
a great call.
Kicking it back to you, I was hoping that we would go entire crossover Thursday episode without the Taysom Hill name being dropped on the podcast. And unfortunately, we had to do it. But what is Taysom Hill's role in the Saints' new look offense under Clint Kubiak? What are you expecting from him this weekend?
Can I answer the question about what his role is by simply saying yes? That's kind of what his role has been so far this season. He'll take snaps at running back, he'll take snaps at fullback, tight end, wide receiver, in the slot, quarterback. Like they'll just fold him in everywhere. And then he's on both kick and punt return and coverage units as well. They missed him last week up against the Philadelphia Eagles. That would have been a massive help, especially after losing Eric McCoy, to just have that extra juice in the run game in terms of what it is that he's able to provide. Look, Alvin Kamara missed Wednesday's practice with a hip/ribs injury. I think he'll probably be fine by the time that the actual weekend rolls around, but just a big one to watch. And if he's hampered in any way, or if he's not able to go, it's not only Jamal Williams, the backup running back, that ends up being called upon. It's Taysom Hill that's going to be called upon in that run game. So I would expect him to be somebody that ends up getting the ball quite often from a variety of different ways. But I expect that it's mostly going to be his involvement would mostly be in the run game, although he still has the option to go out there and run, or not the option, but is still called upon to go out there and run routes and things like that as well.
Yeah. And, on that third key to victory that I suggested about making adjustments, basically what I mean
such a good one, by the way,
is, my worry with the Atlanta Falcons is that, they're going to be this team that is we're going to run what we're going to run, and it's up to our opponent to stop us. And I would like to see the team do things differently, right? It's the idea of like, if you're a team and you do A, B, and C well, and then, injuries take away B, and then you're playing an opponent that can also take away C, can you make that adjustment, and just instead of just relying on doing A well, you can also now add D and E and F to your repertoire. And I think if the Falcons can show that they can do that, given some of the concerns we have with the run game, and not being able to rely as much on the outside zone scheme, with their ability to stop the run, that to me is going to be a big key to not only their success on Sunday, but throughout the rest of the season, because that's going to be something that you're going to need to do as the season wears on, because attrition and injuries and all these various things, the different matchups are going to affect you. And I think for me, that's the one lingering question I have with this new Falcons coaching staff on how good are they at making some of these adjustments, because in both of their losses to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Kansas City Chiefs, it felt like both of those teams, especially those defenses, kind of figured out what the Falcons were doing midway through the game, and the Falcons really weren't able to kind of make those in-game adjustments to figure something out to sort of counter what those defenses were doing. So I think that's going to be important this week, especially going up against another very good defense under a very good defensive coordinator in head coach in Dennis Allen.
Yeah, it's funny. This is now the moment where a lot of Saints fans that are listening go, wait, is he talking about the Falcons or is he talking about the Saints? Because like this is one of those things that happens when you get into sort of the business of the wide zone offense. And both of these teams dealt in that sort of, black market over the course of this offseason, and getting Zach Robinson over in Atlanta, having Clint Kubiak here in New Orleans. There's a lot of that mentality of just going to run what they run and win with it. And that's going to be the idea. And I think Saints fans kind of got introduced to that a little bit last week, to where, they were running what they were running. It wasn't working. Then they ran what they typically run, but they ran it out of something else and it still didn't work. And they didn't really have another avenue to go to. And then the big question mark became, is that an inability to adjust, an unwillingness to adjust, which is very common around the NFL. I wish that people really realize how common that is, that most teams go in and say, this is the identity, we're not changing, and don't really make those big wide swath change of direction adjustments. They make sort of smaller tweaks and things like that throughout a game. But we saw that with New Orleans. And so the big question was it injury driven, or was it like this is sort of part of what it is to have a wide zone offense? And so it's going to be really interesting to see both of these teams potentially end up in that same situation again this week, to where one of them will have to adjust. Who adjusts best might be the one that ends up walking away with the victory.
For more on Ross and more on Aaron, check them out over at Locked On Saints and Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now we're going to get into a wild card rematch, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa came out on top in the playoffs last year, but it's a new season in Philadelphia with Saquon Barkley. We'll be looking to dominate on the ground against the Tampa Bay team with Baker Mayfield that is coming off a disappointing loss to Denver in Week 3. So you have Gino Camilleri of Locked On Eagles and James Yarko of Locked On Bucks with everything you need to know, keys to victory, predictions, and so much more.
Wrapping things up here on a Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Eagles and Locked On Bucks. And of course, Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Gino, this is the third time that these two teams have met within the last calendar year. This is the rubber match. You know, I did this with Matt Derry of Locked On Lions. The Lions were 2-0 heading into that game. This one between the Bucks and Eagles, it's 1-1. Let's see who is able to come away victorious and win the series 2-1, I guess we should say. So if it's going to be the Eagles, what are the three things that they have to do in order to get this road win at Raymond James Stadium?
I've been holding off on this one, and this is number one through and through. There was a moment last year where Todd Bowles created a paradigm shift in Philadelphia where Jalen Hurts had no answers against the blitz. This year, he's been exceptional, and I think it has to come after that game against Tampa where they blitzed him to death. Number one, understand the blitz is coming and have all the answers. Number two, like I mentioned with Jalen Hurts, put a stop to the turnovers. You're the quarterback. Lead by example. When you're good, you're a top 5 quarterback in terms of EPA per drop back. You put this team in a position to succeed week in and week out. You have to go and lead by example. You can't continue to turn the ball over. Number 3, just run the damn ball. It's so easy. You have the best running back in football right now with the best offensive line. Even when the right side of that line went out of that game, it did not miss a beat. And if you're without your top 2 weapons on the outside, you have to play the songs that hit. And it's the Eagles' run game, no matter what. Go down to Tampa and control the clock. It's probably going to be a hot, humid environment right after the hurricane rolls through there. Control the clock. Make that Tampa defense tired. Take care of the football. When we say these 3 keys each week, I'm like, it's so simple. Why don't they just execute these? This seems like an easy thing not to turn the ball over, to have answers against the blitz and to control the clock. But that's why you play it. It's a week in, week out league. We know that. Patrick Mahomes isn't his full self yet. The Bengals are 0-3. Minnesota's 3-0. Who knows anything at this current point in time? You have to be self-aware, know yourself, do the things that work best.
Yeah, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, 3-0. We're living in the upside down, Gino.
It doesn't make any sense at all, this league.
None of it
makes this job fun, because you come here 5 days a week and you're like, oh, day 6, I don't know what's going to happen on that 6th day.
Yeah, it's nothing makes sense, and that's why we love the NFL, because every year there's something that happens that doesn't make any sense. What makes a lot of sense for the Buccaneers if they want to win this game? First, run the ball. I'm with you on both teams.
Yep.
Control the clock, establish the run. That's a big key for the Buccaneers. But if they're going to run the ball, they have to do it effectively. On the flip side, contain Saquon Barkley. If the Eagles are going to win this game, you have to force a weakened receiving core to step up and be the reason why. Force Jahan Dotson to be the playmaker.
Yep.
That's where the Bucs defense can really make some hay. And then finally, protect Baker Mayfield. the Eagles are going to get a heavy dose of Bucky Irving, who is one of the most elusive backs in the NFL without a lot of opportunity. Only 25 carries on the season, but he has 154 yards. He's averaging 4 yards a carry after contact. That is huge. The Bucs have to make sure that he is one of the focal points of this offense and really gets that run game going. Then you can bring in Rachaad White to hit him with a little bit more power than elusiveness like Bucky brings. Protecting Baker Mayfield. I mentioned it earlier. 1 sack in week 1. He's been sacked 12 times over the last 2 weeks. It is ruining what this offense is capable of because they haven't been able to protect Baker Mayfield. That can change if Luke Gedeke is good to go this week and make his return after missing the last 2 weeks with a concussion. And then you said it, Gino, Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the NFL right now. The Bucs are allowing the 8th most rushing yards per game in the NFL at 137.7. Most of those have come on the legs of Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. They've been able to shut down some of these running backs. Also worth noting, the Eagles allow the 9th most at 134.7. But you have to contain Saquon Barkley and force Jalen Hurts to beat this defense with some average to below average receivers should A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith not play.
I think you hit it right on the head, and it's going to be a chess match because that's what the NFL is each week. How can we get, let's say, 75% of our guys, because of injuries, in the best position against a team that they're in the same position you are? Injuries are a thing that happen in the National Football League. They were an excuse for you the last time you went down to Tampa Bay. Oh, we don't have A.J. Brown. This thing has been terrible. We're got 9 losses in our last 10 or whatever that ridiculous number was. There's no more excuses. You have a bye week next week. You got to just play with your hair on fire. And I think Tampa, like you said, losing to Bo Nix, it's going to be a pissed off football team. I think it's going to be 2 football teams that realize, like you said, this could be a lot to play for, man. I mean, look at, you had to go on the road last year because of a tiebreaker to the Dallas Cowboys, and you don't win the division. So it'll be a good rubber match. I really don't know who is going to win. I still think it's going to be a 1-score game. The Eagles, that's all they play are 1-score football games. Could be coming down to the last drive like it has every single week, and that's how the Eagles are. They stress the hell out of me, and I'm sure the same way with the Bucs.
Gino and James have that Eagles and Bucs insight that you do not want to miss out on. So for more on what they have to say, check them out over at Locked On Eagles and Locked On Bucs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the Ultimate NFL pregame show, we'll continue diving into the great 1 p.m. slate in week 4, getting you up to speed and ready for game day. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, the show is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. We are back, our second segment of the Ultimate NFL pregame show here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Kevin Ostreicher still hanging out with you here. We're going to now get into the second part of the 1 p.m. games. Starting off, we have an AFC South matchup, the Houston Texans taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Houston coming off of a pretty disappointing loss to the Minnesota Vikings in Week 3, and Jacksonville just absolutely demolished by the Buffalo Bills in prime time. So both those teams hoping to get back on track. So you have John Hickman of Locked On Texans. You have Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars. They take you through everything you need to know leading up to the game.
John, let me bring us back here, man. We're going to get back into our crossover here in just a second. But I have to let you know that the crossover edition of Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Texans is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5.
It's a $45 come up.
Mm-hmm.
Who don't like that? I
love it.
I like it. And I also like the Houston Texans chances Sunday. I'll be at the NRG Stadium. I think that my presence there will be graceful and it'll be a blessed afternoon. And I think Houston will get it going offensively. I watched the game, some of the game against the Bills for you guys.
Yeah.
And I came away from the game thinking to myself, well, the Jags struggle with, I thought, mesh routes, crossing routes.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that with Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, those are two receivers that I think can thrive in that role as a receiver. I think Houston will get the ball rolling offensively by utilizing their playmaker wide receivers. And do I think they're going to put up, 47, 40?
Yeah, 47. Go ahead. It was 47. They dropped the 47 burger. Go ahead.
15, a 40, a 45, a 47. Do. But I think Houston,
yeah.
I think Houston going to put up some points Sunday. I think this is one of those games that at the end of the year, they're going to look back and say, man, we needed this game to get our communication down with our offensive line so they can be able to learn, cut out these false starts, what's your assignment on a stunt, and give that time to CJ so he can sit back there in the pocket comfortably because he's been pressured a lot this year, which is not ideal, to give him time to deliver some of these beautiful balls that he normally does to Nico, to Stephon, to Tank, and they'll be able to get the ball rolling. I think Houston will put up about 28 points on you guys.
All right, so they're not going to drop a 40 burger. So the thing is with this game is I'm going to pick Houston to win the game because I'm not an idiot, right? The Jaguars aren't playing well. They haven't really shown, outside of the first three quarters against Miami in week one, they haven't really shown what they say they want to be. So what I will tell you is this is exactly the kind of game where guys like that, and I know a lot of them in that locker room, and I know that coaching staff, this is exactly the kind of game where they just step up and go, not today. But I don't think it'll be good enough, and I don't believe in moral victories. However, I do believe the Jaguars probably played their best game of the season and then lose a very close game. I think they're motivated. I think they realize that there's a lot that people are talking about maybe coaches, and I ain't gonna talk about people, that people need to be fired and there needs to be a change and all of that stuff. But the bottom line is the way they're yoked, the way they're built, if you can't run the ball and they don't have a threat of you running the ball, they can really mix and match things. Now, they're a little bit banged up in the secondary, and their linebacker Foy,
he's out.
Yeah, Foy Olubakan, he's out with plantar fasciitis, so that's a bit of a challenge. This is about situational football, though. Who can put who in certain situations and allow what you want to do to basically impose your will on this game? I think because of that, it's going to be very, very close. I think Trevor Lawrence, one of the best games I ever seen was when people were doubting him and they were talking about C.J. Stroud. And they came to Houston last year, and Trevor Lawrence played the game of his life.
Yeah, he did.
I really do believe that opportunities like that do exist. I think it's a close game. I think Houston's probably going to win 28-24. However, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jaguars find a way to pull it out.
I do want to say this. We can never overlook division games.
No.
That was a point of mine going into the Indianapolis Colts game. Like, you can never overlook a division game. You see those guys twice a year. And for a good amount of those players, they see the same team in the 3-year span 6 times. So they know a team. They know the DNA of a team. They know what can kind of make a team play well and what to do to take away that team's ability to play well. So I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I'm not looking for a blowout. One of our listeners said the Texans should curb stomp the Jags. I'm not looking for that. No. What I am looking for is an offensive performance where we can be comfortable with and proud of after the game. And I'm going to say this. I do think after Sunday's game, the Texans should perform so well that, it should be a coaching change. If Doug Peterson keeps his job off beating the Houston Texans, we got a problem.
Right.
So I hate to say be fired and all of that because men have families to provide for.
Right. Right.
So I don't want to necessarily say he should be fired, but I mean, the Texans should win this game, and he should not be there after Tuesday.
If they play well, he won't get fired. In fact, you have to think, what if they fire him? What are they going to do? They're going to promote Ryan Nielsen, the defensive coordinator, the head coach, and make Mike McCoy the quarterback coach. Because if Doug gets fired, they're going to fire Press Taylor too. And the thing is Press Taylor's the offensive coordinator. So the thing is I do think that Shad has been slow to fire in the past. I do believe that there's a little bit of a sentiment that if things get worse, that he will make a decision that Doug has to go, but that decision doesn't have to coincide with it actually happening right now. Sometimes the best thing to do is just let things continue to play out the way they are. But I think the Jaguars really, really do make a good showing of themselves this week, and they'll have a chance to win it late. I did predict that they wouldn't be blown out at any game that they play this year. And that has already been debunked by Buffalo, who beat them by 37. So we'll see. We'll see. But I think the Jaguars show up, play better, but still fall short.
John is great, plus Tony's great. And you can check them out over at Locked On Texans and Locked On Jaguars, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, we're going to move to Indianapolis. The Pittsburgh Steelers are undefeated with Justin Fields at the helm. They're 3-0. The Indianapolis Colts have seen some struggles, particularly with Anthony Richardson, although they were able to best the Chicago Bears in week 3. But these two teams matching up against one another, and Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, as well as Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts, have keys, storylines, predictions, and a lot more as you get ready for game day.
Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, which is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Chris. So Steelers, the 3 biggest factors to them winning this game, what are they?
I think there's a few things you want to look at here. One, you've got to be able to take away Jonathan Taylor. You take away Jonathan Taylor and you make this about Anthony Richardson, you're putting this into the hands of the style of defense that you want to play in this game, because if the Steelers stuff the run, it forces Richardson in more predictable situations, and it allows the defense to pin their ears back. They'll get after the quarterback. And make no mistake, it's not just Watton and Herbig on the edges. It's also Hayward. It's also, and they might throw a pass rush in there a couple times from their off-ball linebackers, Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts, Peyton Wilson. They're all very good at that. But if they stuff the run and they let those guys pin their ear backs, that'll be step number 1 to setting the tone to the game that you want to do. On the flip side, if they get the run going and they make it about Najee Harris and about Cordero Patterson and Jaylen Warren running the ball, Colts are going to be in for a long day, because like you said, the Colts have the worst time of possession in the league. The Steelers have the second best. That will put this script right in line for exactly what the Steelers want to do in this game. They want to tire you out. And if the Steelers get it going early on the ground, that's going to make it even worse when it's later in the game and the Colts are trying to figure things out and they're tired, while the Steelers have been playing at their pace. So I look at that. But one matchup in particular, if I'm going to be looking at that too, is also when it gets to those predictable situations, even less about Anthony Richardson. The Colts, I love their playmakers. Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, I covered him in the ACC, Alec Pierce. All of those guys can be dynamic and can break games open. The Steelers need their off-ball, their corners, their safeties, their off-ball linebackers to all help and try to limit those guys from making plays after the catch. Make Anthony Richardson have to check the ball down, but when he does, get to those guys, tackle them short of the sticks, play your style of football. Like you said, if Anthony Richardson can hit on some big plays to some of these guys, and let's be real, these guys all have those big play abilities. Pierce has shown it, Pittman's shown it in years past. Josh Downs has the speed to get there. Those are the things that can break the game open and make this not about the script that the Steelers want to write for this game. So if you're looking at things, stuff the run. Do not let Jonathan Taylor take over. Establish the run early yourself, and don't let these big playmakers be big playmakers.
Yeah, I'd have to say kind of a similar approach for the Colts. So things they've absolutely got to do. They have to get Jonathan Taylor going, or just some sort of heartbeat in the run game. That could even be an Anthony Richardson game, but they're not going to win if they are one-dimensional, just passing the ball with Anthony Richardson. That's going to be a huge problem. So they've got to get Jonathan Taylor involved, and I think they got to get points on the board early because we obviously talked about neither of these teams is really built to play from behind. So doing that, last week certainly helped in a game against the Bears, but the Steelers aren't going to pass the ball 50 times.
No.
So I would also you just know that like TJ Watt is going to get his. The pass rush from Pittsburgh, they're going to at minimum get pressures. Something that's pretty not great to start out the week is Braden Smith, the Colts right tackle, who would be largely tasked with going against TJ Watt, did not practice today with a knee. It's a knee that bothered him like all of last year. He missed like all of the offseason with it. He's been playing and he's been playing lights out this year. But that's, it's a knee that's given him problems in the past. So the guy you're really going to be relying on to, take up Pittsburgh's best defensive player, that could be a tough one. So if you can capitalize on that with like some screens in that area or just, designing some things to capitalize on that, it's going to happen. So, get Anthony out on boots, get him out where you're moving the pocket and not making it so easy, making him a sitting duck. And then on the defensive side of the ball, for a week and a half now, they've done a really good job against the run. I think they're going to have to do that because, again, if you force Justin Fields to play from behind and have to throw a bit more, this is a group that can take the ball away. I mean, Kenny Moore, Julian Blackmon are their biggest defensive playmakers. Jalen Jones had 2 interceptions last week. Mm-hmm. These guys can take the ball away if you're going to make Justin Fields throw. And obviously from his time with the Bears, he was constantly pummeled. If he could just keep pressure on him and also stop the run, that defensive front, they've been very reliant on good play from them. And I think they're going to have to show up and do it again. I mean, it's not exactly fair that every game is going to have to be so dependent on them, but this is another one.
No, I agree. It's one of those games where you want to make the game dependent on the quarterbacks on both teams. Like that's the thing is that, neither team has the established quarterback that's so well rooted in their system, like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or one of those type of guys, where if you make the game about them, they're still going to hurt you. But at the same time, you also have to not let them get the layup touchdowns. Like last week, the Steelers, Justin Herbert threw a touchdown, but it was on a busted coverage play where Minka Fitzpatrick, thought something was called, and Joey Porter Jr. went one way, he went the other, and then that led to an open guy. Similarly to Kirk Cousins, that Kyle Pitts just kind of floated to the end zone when Beanie Bishop didn't run with him in his zone, and that was a little bit of a breakdown. But again, if I'm pointing at things that the Steelers have done wrong, they've done about 100 times more things right that have allowed them to be the number one defense through 3 weeks. So, I think this game is going to come down to, a very classic game of football. Don't make mistakes. Don't turn the ball over. Control the line of scrimmage. You do that on either side, you win. I think that the Steelers one particular player-to-player matchup that I'm loving to see here, Jake, is Cam Hayward versus Quentin Nelson, because we've seen these guys tussle before. We've seen Cam Hayward get the best of him. Last year, I think Nelson got the best of him in return because, Hayward was coming off an injury. But now you have a fresh Cam Hayward who's been playing very well. You have a fresh Quentin Nelson who's graded extremely highly by Pro Football Focus this year. I want to see those two dudes go at it all game long. And the stuff like that can set a tone. If Nelson's able to neutralize the Steelers' big man in the middle of the defense, well, then all of a sudden, maybe that sparks some momentum. But in reverse, if the Steelers, if Cam Hayward is moving Quentin Nelson around and he's winning that spot in the line of scrimmage, that's going to set a tone that allows the Steelers defense to play downhill, aggressive, and maybe they're setting the tone. So again, tone setting, physicality. If you love old school football, turn this one on Sunday. It's going to be a fun one.
That matchup has been a really good. Obviously, the Colts and Steelers seem to play all the time, but Hayward and Nelson.
It's weird.
Yeah, I know the standings and how all that works out for your future opponents. That's just how it's gone. But no, they seem to play each other a lot. Nelson versus Hayward is always a great matchup. I'm really looking forward when it comes to the Colts. Josh Downs, that is who Anthony Richardson has had the most chemistry with throughout their young careers. But Downs, missed some time early. He made his debut last week. He had a high ankle sprain in training camp. So he just got back last week. That is, I think, the guy that is going to be the difference between Anthony Richardson finally smoothing out some of those rough edges, getting that completion percentage up, moving the chains, just taking those layups that I mentioned. They really need Josh Downs to get more involved now that he's back. This will be his second week. I think working him back into the offense will be a big deal. One thing I'm definitely confident in, these two teams are very different than the 30-13 game last December. I mean, shoot, the Colts whole backfield, it was Jonathan Taylor wasn't in that one. Anthony Richardson wasn't in that one. This is going to be a much, much different game.
It is. Both teams, I think, are a lot healthier. Everyone's dealing with injuries. It's part of the game. But these are different times. The Steelers at that time, they were trying Mitch Trubisky at quarterback because Kenny Pickett had gotten hurt and things weren't going too well. They would bench Mitch Trubisky at the end of that game and get in Mason Rudolph, who would lead them to the playoffs. And now you're a bit more confident in Justin Fields. Can the Colts rock the boat at quarterback again? I think that's going to be their goal, just as the Steelers are going to try to rock the boat on Anthony Richardson. I think it's going to be a fun physical game where I like these games. I don't like pure rock fights where there's no scoring, but when there's like physical football, running backs hitting their gaps, smart play action being used for quick timing windows, passing windows. I think that there's a lot to be learned from games like that, and especially in today's NFL where defenses are starting to catch up to what offenses have been doing for the last 10 years or so.
Would be a big spot for Indianapolis to continue their momentum, but obviously Pittsburgh has a lot of that right now, and it seems like they're not trying to stop that anytime soon. So for more on Chris, more on Jake, check them out over at Locked On Steelers, Locked On Colts, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As we talked about the Bears are winless. Caleb Williams has yet to pick up a win as a starter at the NFL level, and the Los Angeles Rams are very beat up, but were able to knock off the San Francisco 49ers last week. So Travis Rogers of Locked On Rams, as well as Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, will take you through if this is the week Caleb Williams gets his win or if the Rams can stack another one.
All right, welcome into our crossover Thursday. Locked On Bears, Locked On Rams, Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears, Travis Rogers from Locked On Rams. Breaking down this Bears-Rams Sunday matchup. Today's crossover podcast, again, is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play 5. Travis, when you look at the Rams coming into this matchup, what are the biggest things they need to do to win this game?
I think right at the top of the list, and it's something that we touched on briefly, Lauren, at the beginning, is they're going to have to get another performance like they did in the third unit, right? The offense and defense are going to kind of be what they're going to be. Can they continue to be really good in special teams? And Rams fans will know we haven't talked about that in a few seasons. That last year in particular was brutal in the special teams. They were the worst in the league. They were missing PATs. They couldn't kick a field goal beyond 40 yards. Their punt game was not particularly good. They had no return game to speak of in the punt return. They had huge plays in all three of those respects. They got a punt down inside the 10-yard line when they had to have it. They got a big return when they had to have it. Josh Carty hasn't missed a PAT. Josh Carty hasn't missed a field goal attempt this year as a rookie. That's pretty darn good. So I think Matthew Stafford is going to give you a chance to be around the game. It's very unlikely that I think you're going to see a repeat of what happened in Arizona, where halfway through the second quarter, it's just like, this thing's a wrap. It's not going to happen. Hang around. Give your special teams a chance to maybe steal one at the end, get them in position. I think that if the Rams play well in the third phase of the game, they got a pretty good chance.
I will say the Bears have done pretty well on special teams this year. I don't know where you'd rank them, top 15, top 10 or whatever, but they love the rookie punter. Torrey Taylor has done a great job of flipping fields and not giving a lot of big opportunities for returns on punts. And they've been pretty effective in the coverage units, not missing too many tackles there. So if they can break one free, that can definitely be a big difference. Although, week 1, the Bears got a blocked punt for a touchdown that flipped the game for them too, as well. So who can find the advantage on that side of the ball will be a big factor. Anything else jump out at you besides special teams here for the Rams to go to victory?
Yeah, it's football 101, right? Don't turn it over. The Rams have only turned the ball over once this season. That's pretty darn good. Matthew Stafford's been really good. They threw one pick. It was in the end zone as a red zone interception. So it was a bad one Sunday Night Football against the Lions, but they have been pretty conservative, or I should say pretty effective when it comes to holding on to that ball. So I stay close, get it near the end, put the ball in Matthew Stafford's hands. And if they win the turnover battle, I think they're going to get to Caleb Williams. That one of the things that, another thing that I think keep your eye on is Byron Young, who's in his second year on the edge, is a lot better than he was a year ago. And he was pretty good a year ago. Jared Verse, the first round draft pick the Rams have had since Jared Goff, believe it or not, a million years ago. He's been really good. I think that he's been one of those guys that you watch the first 3 weeks, and it's one of those, hey, is he as good as he looks? Because if he's on that trajectory of getting better by the middle of the end of the season, he could be a real problem for some teams. Knowing what we know, like you mentioned about the Bears offensive line, knowing that Caleb Williams' has a propensity to hold on to the ball maybe a little bit longer than he might, or he probably should. I think if you can get some pressure from both of those edges, that's a big deal for the Rams as well.
Yeah, I think matchup-wise for the Bears in that regard, the bigger issue on the offensive line has been the interior than the outside. Yeah. But that being said, your left tackle Braxton Jones is on injured report with a knee this week. Right tackle Darnell Wright is dealing with a back injury. So whether they play or not, they might not be at 100% either way. And so trying to get things rolling on up the middle for the Bears will be a challenge. Whereas I think when the edge pressure comes, it's a little bit easier for Caleb to feel that and get around it. Although, I say that, and he got blindsided by a blindside strip sack last week against the Colts. So if you can get there quickly, he's not going to be ready for it in that regard. Because like you said, he does want to make that play and hold on to the ball, but he's been trying to speed up that time to throw every single week.
Yeah, that's young quarterback stuff. We saw it with Goff here for a long time. It's just one of those, that clock in your head. This is, you might be able to run away from somebody in college football. These guys are pros too, and they close pretty darn fast. So I think that's important for the Rams. What about for your guys? What about for the Bears? What are the keys?
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of been the same thing every week so far. Like, can you get a running game going for the first time all season? That just has not been something they can do consistently on the ground. And then if you get the ground game going, can you open up things in pass protection a little bit more? Can that make the job of the offensive line easier to run play action and have defensive linemen have to kind of respect the run before, on their way to the quarterback? If they're going to be able to pin their ears back and go get them, that becomes a lot more of a challenge for them to hold up and for Caleb and this offense to open things up. Because I think this Bears defense is going to do good enough. They're not going to shut down the Rams and Stafford entirely, but this is a good enough defense that if your offense can play average, you can win football games like this. It's just been that struggle to get things going enough offensively to even be close to average to win games. So, it's about being able to run the football and not be so one-dimensional. So you don't have to ask Caleb to throw 50 plus times and get 300 plus yards, which is great, but not when you still lose the football game.
Yeah, well, if the key is to run the football, I think you might have an opportunity, because that's something the Rams have struggled with. James Conner had a big day against them. We saw it. Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery in the opener with the Lions had a pretty good day against them. That, and like I mentioned at the top, the Rams tackling through the first 3 weeks has not been particularly strong. And if that's what they come at them with, I'm really interested to see how the Rams respond.
Yeah, we said the same thing against the Colts last week, and it was fourth. The Bears had first and goal, ran it 4 times, didn't get in, including a 4th and 1 where they ran a speed option out of the pistol where Caleb pitched it to DeAndre Swift, and they lost like 13 yards, and 4 offensive linemen were on the ground looking back at defensive players that blew by them. Like, it's as disastrous of a run game as you could possibly get. And I think that's why I'm surprised that the Bears are 2.5-point favorites at home on FanDuel Sportsbook. Like, I don't expect the Bears to win this game. I mean, as we get into predictions here, like I'm surprised that they're then the favorites even at home. Like, I just don't have enough faith in this team to figure it out all of a sudden, even though I know the Rams are hurt and I know they're 1-2 and I know they've had some bad games, but like, they did find a way to beat the San Francisco 49ers. Like, good teams find a way to win games, and the Bears have done a better job of finding ways to lose games than win them.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. That the Rams are favored on the road feels weird. That just, that just feels like a lot with dealing with what they're dealing with. But I think it goes back to what we've both been talking about. They have a good quarterback. They have a good coach. That always gives you a really good chance. So I would be surprised if this was more than a 7-point game either way. The Rams they have a very early bye this year. They have a bye in week 6. So they need to get through this. They got Green Bay the week after that back at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. So if they can somehow, some way get to the break at 2-3 with the injuries that they've had, and they've had a pretty tough schedule through the early part of the season, get that extra week, get guys a little bit healthier, start to get some of your players back, because the middle chunk of their schedule is not easy. And so they have to get at least near 500 going into that break. And I think they got a much better chance of winning this one than they do a week from now with Green Bay coming to town. So I think whatever Sean McVay has, he's going to go to on Sunday.
All right, let's go into a score prediction here, Travis. I find myself certainly not taking the Bears straight up here, and I agree. I don't think it's going to be like a blowout in one direction or the other, but I do think the Bears defense will hold the Rams to some field goals when they wanted touchdowns, but enough of those add up to win the game, whereas I think the Bears may have a turnover or two that puts their defense in a bad spot and keeps them from scoring. So I'm going to say Rams 23, Bears 16, and it's kind of an ugly field goal fest a lot of ways, and maybe it's 23-9 for a while, and then the Bears get a touchdown late to make it a one-score game, but again, kind of feels a little bit too little too late, but makes the final score feel like a closer football game and maybe reflect a little bit more of where the two teams stand. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's funny. I think 23 wins the game too. I think that is, but I think it's a little bit closer than that. I think it's probably a 23-20, a 23-21. I think it's probably one of those that's very, very tight. If I'm gambling on this game, I'm running the opposite direction. This is not one that I feel great about either way. I'm staying away from this one, but I think Sean McVay is a much better coach than Matt Eberflus, so I will give him the advantage there. Give me the Stafford experience advantage over Caleb Williams. I'll lean Rams on this, but I would not be surprised by any result either way.
We've seen flashes and improvement from Caleb Williams, and maybe this is the week, but the Rams certainly will be looking to continue playing spoiler on Caleb Williams and him getting that elusive first NFL victory. For more on Travis, more on Lauren, check him out over at Locked On Rams and Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Broncos, huge win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 3. That was a massive, massive win. And then you have the New York Jets, who Aaron Rodgers looking like his Aaron Rodgers self again. So Sarah Bedinger of Locked On Broncos, John Butchko of Locked On Jets have everything you need to know about the matchup.
It's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John, the host of Locked On Jets, along with Sarah, the co-host of Locked On Broncos. Sarah, what are your keys to victory for the Broncos in this week 4 game?
Well, I'm excited. I think the keys to victory for the Broncos in this game against the Jets, number 1, be the better running team in this game, which is easier said than done. Number 2, keep on holding on to the ball. Don't turn the ball over, especially early in this game. And number 3, force turnovers defensively. I said the same thing last week, John, when the Broncos went to Tampa Bay. You go on the road against a tough team with a good quarterback that can run the ball or that has playmakers on offense that can beat you. You need to make sure that you are turning the ball over defensively. And the Broncos, like I said, they've gotten home with the quarterbacks they've played. They've gotten really good pass rush, high pass rush win rate all year. I said it last week to James when we were talking about the Bucs. I'm like, get to Baker Mayfield and force him to make some bad decisions early on in the game. He did exactly that through an interception on the second possession, and it helped the Broncos get out to a 14-0 road lead, and that defense pins its ears back all game long. If the Broncos can do that this week, get to a point where, man, you force an early turnover or you force a couple of 3-and-outs early on in this game, you have to put your foot on the gas as an offense and make sure that you're taking advantage of what your defense is giving you out there. You cannot be going like we saw against Seattle. Bo Nix throwing untimely as if there's ever a timely interception, right? You throw a couple of interceptions, one in the red zone. That's not going to help you win on the road. You got to make sure you're taking care of the football. And I feel like, unfortunately, that, the keys to victory, they can be so basic, right? But it's like, if your team's not doing the basic things well, you want to see that repeatedly over and over again. Now that we saw the Broncos do it against the Bucs, can they do it again here in week 4?
In your third key speaks to me because that week 2 game the Jets played against Tennessee, one of the big reasons that they won the game was Will Levis had some really bad turnovers, including one play, which I talk about this like almost every day on Locked On Jets because I still can't believe it. Like he literally rolled the ball to the Jets. Like he was being tackled. Being sacked, and he just rolled the ball to the Jets player. I've never seen any. I've seen ridiculous play after ridiculous play by young Jets quarterbacks over the last 15 years, but I've never seen anything like that.
Will Levis is a little unhinged, isn't he? I kind of like watching it. So it's unpredictable watching him. I like it.
Yeah, it's something exciting is going to happen. It could be good or bad, but something exciting is always going to happen when you watch him play. So I have 3 keys to victories for the Jets. One is, I think this worries me because I'm depending on Nathaniel Hackett to scheme something up here. But number one is, I think the Jets need to figure out a way to get Garrett Wilson away from Patrick Surtain. Last couple of years, I think this is a matchup Wilson struggled with. I think Surtain matches up, his strengths match up well against Garrett Wilson, the things Garrett Wilson doesn't do so well. So I'd like to see the Jets try and, use their formations, bunch things up, create traffic, maybe get Garrett Wilson on the move, in motion, try and stick him in the slot, figure out ways to free him up, because I think that's a tough matchup for him stylistically. Number 2, I'll elaborate on something you talked about. You talked about the Broncos pass rush. Give Olu Fashanu extra help. Olu Fashanu is making his first career start. He was the 11th overall pick this year. Started the season as the swing tackle for the Jets. Now Morgan Moses is out. He suffered an injury last week against New England. So the rookie's in there. And fortunately for the Jets on the other side, they have a guy who's as good of a tackle as we've seen in his generation in Tyron Smith. Tyron Smith's not a guy who needs a lot of help. He's playing at a really high level through the first couple of weeks for the Jets, which means you can give – I always feel like you can give one of your 2 tackles help. And Fashanu is the guy the Jets are going to need to give help in this one. And then my third key for the Jets is throw different looks at Bo Nix. The Jets normally schematically, they're not a team that tries to surprise you. They're a team that is kind of, this is what we do, and we think we can out execute you. That changed a little bit last week against the Patriots. And Patriots are kind of a unique team because they're so focused on the run. But Jets are going up against a rookie quarterback this week. And look, Bo Nix is the most experienced rookie quarterback that's ever played in the NFL, 60 career starts in college. But I still think, no matter how many games you played in college, there are defensive concepts you haven't seen. And as we talked about, sometimes when you get a rookie quarterback early in the season, that's the time to take advantage. You get a rookie, sometimes even the best rookie quarterbacks, you get to November, December, they start to get comfortable with some of the more complex defensive looks they get. But we're still early enough in the season that maybe you can throw something at Bo Nix he hasn't seen before and force one of those big mistakes.
How about this gauntlet for his first 4 games, right? Mike McDonald calling plays for the Seattle Seahawks defense, then Mike Tomlin for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Terrell Austin obviously is there as well, and then Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers in week 3. And now you get obviously Robert Saleh and the Jets there. So it's a gauntlet for a rookie quarterback to go through, and you're absolutely right. Giving him those kind of looks is going to make it very interesting. Like, how much does he press the ball? Can the Jets kind of rattle him early? Like we kind of saw, maybe first game jitters, but he was rattled a little bit early on against Seattle and was not really pulling the trigger on the passes deeper down the field. Can they rattle him a little bit early on in this game? Can you get to Bo Nix, who's really good at avoiding pressure and not taking unnecessary sacks, but he's kind of shown that he might put the ball in harm's way to avoid the sack a little bit this year. So we'll have to wait and see, but that's a tough gauntlet for any quarterback to go through, much less a guy making his first 4 starts in the league.
I don't know if it gets to this point one way or the other. Maybe the Broncos are winning or losing by too much or whatnot, but Zach Wilson revenge game, if Bo Nix somehow, gets benched or whatnot in this game, I don't know how it'll turn out, but some Zach Wilson snaps would be crazy. Obviously, he went from New York to Denver this offseason, but great game ahead. I think it'll be better than some people anticipate. For more on Sarah, more on John. Check him out over at Locked On Broncos, Locked On Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That'll do it for the 1 p.m. slate, but there's still plenty of great matchups ahead. Coming up, we'll be taking you through that 4 o'clock, 4:25 p.m. matchup slate, so be sure to stay tuned. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest, most sustainable way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So 1 in Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. And PrizePicks posts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So for this weekend slate of games, if you're looking at that Bengals and Panthers game, maybe you like the rejuvenated Panthers. Maybe you want to go more on Deontay Johnson receiving yards. Maybe the T. Higgins is back. You want to go more on T. Higgins receiving yards. The possibilities are endless. Download the PrizePicks app today. You can just go to Locked On NFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. Let's go to Locked On NFL on PrizePicks and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Week 4 in the NFL is going to have plenty of excitement with incredible matchups all across the board. I'm Kevin Ostreicher, and this is the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, bringing you all you need to know leading up to game time as our local experts take you through key predictions, storylines, big matchups, and everything else to watch in these games. The 425, 4 o'clock window has so many good matchups, and we're going to start off with an AFC West showdown between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers. And Chris Clark and David Drogemeyer of Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Chargers take you through everything you need to know about the game.
All right, guys, we're back here on this crossover Thursday episode here. David Drogemeyer, Locked On Chargers, here with Chris Clark of the Locked On Chiefs podcast. And this crossover Thursday episode is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, we're going to get into some of the key matchups that will end up deciding this football game on Sunday. This is a storied franchise against another storied franchise, two of the original teams in the National Football League. Always going to be a slobber knocker of a contest whenever the Chargers and Chiefs play. I do feel like the Chargers play the Chiefs pretty close for the most part, and at least have in the past. So we'll see if Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter will be able to keep it close in this football game. But when we're talking about the key matchups in this game, Chris, what are you looking at as far as some of the games from the Chiefs perspective, or some of the matchups from the Chiefs perspective that might end up deciding this game?
Really quick, I just have to say I'm really surprised by the lines by FanDuel. First, the over under is surprising. I expect more than that points wise, and the line really surprises me too. But I wonder if they're figuring that Justin Herbert doesn't play. That makes a lot more sense if he doesn't play than if he does. When I look at this game, I go back to what we were talking about just a little bit ago. To me, it's a question of how do they guard Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce, and is it going to be a platoon situation where you put, Asante Samuel Jr. and Christian Fulton on Rice, at different times and maybe double him. And what are you going to do with Travis Kelce? Are you going to put a linebacker on him and a safety? Because you generally can't win a one-on-one matchup with him, especially on a regular basis. So to me, that's going to be one of the biggest matchups when I look at the Chiefs offense versus the Chargers defense, especially without Derwin James. And the other big thing is, you said it earlier, without Bosa playing, that's probably going to give Mahomes at least a second longer to scan the field and try to find somebody. So that's going to help the Chiefs offense as well.
Yeah, well, so that takes me to kind of one of the big matchups for the Chargers that's going to be very important and that's what the backup edge rushers are going to be able to do in Joey Bosa's stead. The Chargers made it a point to add to their edge room in the offseason when they went out and added Bud Dupree to a room that already sported Tuli Tuipulotu, a rookie from USC last year that had a strong season, and obviously Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa dealing with a hip injury is probably going to be out, so now it's time to see what Tuli Tuipulotu and Bud Dupree are going to be able to do in his stead against this Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. I think that's going to be a very, very important matchup. And then one other matchup I'm going to throw in there as far in regards to the Chargers offensive line, and that's how the interior is going to be able to do against the savant from the defensive line from the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, Chris Ice Cold Jones is who I am referring to. That definitely is a scary matchup. Bradley Bozeman has not done very well in pass protection so far to start the season. He's been a good run blocker. That's kind of what his calling card has always been, but the pass protection has left something to be desired from that particular field. So hopefully he has one of his best games, because he's absolutely going to need it going up against Chris Jones.
So, quick question: are they going to move Mac? Do you expect them to move Mac from side to side, or do you think that they're going to keep him going up? Because he generally plays left defensive end, right?
Yeah. Usually plays the opposite side of Joey Bosa, so he's usually rushing over the left tackle. But they have moved him around. They do like to move move Khalil Mack around because he has that power to be able to forklift an interior offensive lineman, and we've seen him literally pick up and move tackles into the quarterback. So he has that ability to move inside, move outside. I think they're going to try to figure out what matchups favor Khalil Mack the most and try to give him as many one-on-one opportunities as humanly possible.
I'm going to guess that it's not going to be in the interior. Generally speaking, that's probably not where you want to have Mack in this matchup. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Joe Tooney.
They're phenomenal. Obviously, very jealous.
Yeah, one of the best trios I think in the middle of an offensive line in the NFL. So when you look at this from my perspective, that was my big question on Mack was if they don't really move him around and he sees Jawan Taylor on a regular basis, I don't think that's a great matchup for him. I'm not going to say he couldn't win it, a couple of times, but Taylor's been playing pretty well. But they're going to be going up against probably Wanya Morris, and that's going to be something the Chiefs are going to have to probably, chip and help, and that's going to be something that they got to get taken care of, and they're going to have to get figured out. So that is going to be a key matchup. When I look at the Chiefs defense, though, you mentioned Chris Jones, and I do think that's going to be a big one. Especially considering you're probably moving your right guard to left tackle, so it would not shock me if Chris Jones decides to line up there a lot. But the name that I think that Chargers fans need to be watching for is Tershawn Wharton. Wharton struggled last year because he was coming back from an ACL. He tore his ACL in 2022, came back last year, wasn't having a very effective year. But he's been fantastic getting after the passer. He's the one that caused the interception of Kirk Cousins last week. And so I do think that, the Chiefs have two guys that can really get after the passer at the defensive tackle position, which is huge because you want to put pressure on a QB. And especially when you're talking about a QB that may be having trouble to move. Herbert likes to move, but he may not be able to move near as much as normal because of his ankle if he plays. So that'll be something to watch there. The other big question when I look at this is, they've struggled with the wide receiver position to an extent, at least from what I've seen. Quentin Johnston has played well. He's played better than I expected considering the training camp he had.
He had a pretty good training camp, I would say. He definitely
he was dropping some passes that you would think that he would catch on a regular basis. He's gotten over that, is I guess really where I'm going with that.
Sure.
At least early on in the training camp, he was dropping some passes. So maybe he's going to be able to take a big step forward, and he has size that the Chiefs don't have at the corner position unless they play Joshua Williams, who has not been playing well for the Chiefs. So I would expect that the corners are going to be McDuffie and a combination of Najee Johnson and Jalen Watson and maybe Chamari Connor, although Connor's been playing a lot of safety and they've been moving around the defense. So, matching up with the wide receivers, and I know stopping the run is going to be a big key for the Chiefs. And we kind of talked about that earlier, but holding Derrick Henry to 3.5 yards a carry and Bijan Robinson to 1.9, the Chiefs defense has figured out how to play the run. And yes, it's going to be different for the Chargers. And it's always different when you go up against a different team. But I think Spagnuolo feels like they're going to be able to stop that, at least slow it down. And they're going to have to put it on whoever the QB's shoulders is. If it's Herbert, obviously that helps a lot.
It definitely does, because Justin Herbert has the ability to carry an offense. He has shown that throughout his career, but the Chargers don't want him to have to do that. They want to be able to get the ball rolling. They want to be able to get some chunk yards in the running game. With Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator, they are not going to abandon the run. They're going to stick to it, and they're going to try to batter the defense with Gus Edwards, try to soften them up, and then try to open up the big holes for J.K. Dobbins to gallop through. And we're going to see if he's able to bounce back in this game, because he just he didn't have a strong performance against the Steelers. The Steelers have a fantastic defensive front, so it just made it very difficult for them to run the football. So I think the other matchup before we get out of here, what I'm looking forward to is Ladd McConkey against the slot corner of the Kansas City Chiefs, because Ladd McConkey has shown an ability to get open very, very quickly. He runs very, very clean routes. He gets separation, and he's got some yards after catchability because he has some really elite quickness.
Yeah, and the big question is who's going to be that slot corner. And I wish I could tell you because the Chiefs have been moving the corners around. McDuffie's played slot corner at times, and if it's McDuffie versus McConkey, I'll take McDuffie. Sorry, I just will.
I hope that they do that because that would be great. That would open things up for the outside if they put him in the slot.
Yeah, it definitely could. I love what McDuffie's done, so I'll be very curious to see how they decide to attack this Chargers offense and their wide receivers, because that's going to be something that's going to play into how this game goes.
Chris is great. David is great. Obviously, the Chiefs coming off of a big win in primetime. The Chargers coming off of a tough loss. So Chargers will hope to right the ship, and Chiefs will look to keep the momentum going. For more on Chris, more on David, check him out over at Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Chargers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's go to the West Coast. Arizona, Kyler Murray is looking great so far through 3 weeks. And Jaden Daniels coming off a huge win in primetime over the Cincinnati Bengals, where he showed that he has arrived to the NFL. And we have Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals and David Harrison of Locked On Commanders to dive into which of these two young quarterbacks will be able to come out on top.
All right. David Harrison at D Harrison 82 on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Finally got my Twitter back, man. Woo! I feel alive. David, pass to victory. I have no idea what you're going to say. I know you sent me a little text. Pass to victory. I'm actually really curious about what they need to emphasize.
Yeah, so the three things that the Washington Commanders have to do in order to win this game is, number one, contain Kyler Murray. Number two, you can't get out physical by James Conner. Number three, you can't get caught up in the hype of coming back to Arizona. Those are the three things you got to do. And Alex, I'll let you pick which one is most intriguing to you, and we can dissect that one first.
Yeah, I think it's the rush attack because of how poorly the Cardinals ran the ball last week. That's so boring. But the rush attack is so important to the Arizona Cardinals offense and the ability to move the ball down the field. That's the biggest one for me. I'd like to hear more about.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting to me. And, again, I've only been to watch 2/3 of the games this year, so there is that grain of salt that needs to be thrown in here. But it looks to me that this Arizona Cardinals offense, they really like to get Connor going, especially that Buffalo Bills game, like 10, I think it was like 10 of the first 12 touches all went his way, and they were physical, and they were in the end, the Bills were trying to stand up, and it was a heavyweight bout, and I was like, man, this is like old school football. And then just gradually they kind of just go away from it. And then watching that Lions game, it was almost the same, like not quite as heavy, right, the workload, but like there was a lot of physicality, and I feel like he's really kind of the physical part of the Cardinals offense. And there was a lot of physicality early, but then especially as they weren't able to kind of take the lead, and the Lions kind of held that lead, and some of the fourth downs didn't work out. Like they just kind of went away from that part of the game. And I just wish that they would just kind of stick there, like looking at like a Cardinals potential success thing. I look at the Washington Commanders, and if there's one thing that they haven't been able to do against opponents this season, even though they're 2-1, is stand up to bullies. Mike Evans pushed them around. Chris Godwin pushed them around. Bucky Irving, different sort of physical skill, right? Speed, agility, ability to get through the gap quick and accelerate, push them around. Then you go to New York, the only bully they got, Malik Neighbors, 2-game career at the time, but he had a career day, but it was a very good day nonetheless, even if it is only a two-game career day. And then you go to Cincinnati, and again, Joe Burrow, one of the best days of his career. If you look at Joe Burrow's stat line and every other stat line he's had like that in his career, this is the only time he's ever lost a game like that. Jamar Chase, same thing. Look at that stat line, all those stat lines in his career, only time he's ever lost this game with that type of a stat line. Zach Moss was doing his thing. Like, this Washington Commanders defense so far can get bullied. So the Arizona Cardinals come out and establish some of that bullying physicality with their running back, which if I'm an offensive coordinator looking at this defense, that's exactly what I'm doing. But then they go away from it. That's going to be, I think this is going to be frustrating for Cardinals fans.
Yeah, it's the they don't know who they are yet thing. Mm-hmm. It's not that, okay? They're almost there, and they don't have, obviously, because they only put up 3 points in the second half while blanking Detroit last week, they don't have an alternative if they're not able to move the rock running the ball right away. And I think that's something it's borderline terrifying, where it's like they're going to figure it out. It's going to be fine. I think you're going to see a lot more play action. I think you're going to see a lot more passes from Kyler Murray, because here's the thing, David. Kyler Murray is the most talented player on the team. Mm-hmm. The more he has the ball in his hand, the better the opportunity for great things to happen. So while running the ball, and I think Drew Petzing's a run-first guy, and I've said it all year, this is going to be a run-first offense, unless Marvin Harrison Jr. is that good where it's like, okay, you kind of need to shift a little bit. So as we're pivoting to the keys to victory for the Cardinals, this is the first game where I've said 15 targets. Mm-hmm. See what the kid's got. And you need to do them in all ways. Okay, so the touchdowns he's caught, varying degrees. Okay, he had the crossing route, which was a great play call by Drew Petzing. Kyler Murray dropped it in the bucket. He beat 2 defenders. Masterful. Kyler Murray's interception was a Hail Mary ball from the 30-yard line into double coverage. It's like, you need smart, concise, zipped-in targets, not to get him going. He doesn't need the juice anymore. He's already there. Mm-hmm. You need to get him the ball in chunk situations. 15 targets, I don't think it's outside of the realm of normalcy. He had 11 last week, I think. That's number one for me. It's like, okay, we've got our sea legs here. You've got a defense you can exploit. Go do it. And I know Jeremy Chin still gives me the chills. Like, I know that he's a guy that people don't really talk about anymore. I don't really understand why. But Marvin Harrison Jr., number one. That's a number one guy. Number two is the Cardinals need to make Jaden Daniels a runner of the football. Like, keep everything in front of you. Little paper cuts are fine. The Terry McLaurin stuff can't happen. Yeah. Because of how electric he is with his feet, make him just do that, and that will slow down any sort of momentum you have with the pass catchers. Now, Zach Ertz is going to get his. Naturally, I'm sure Brian Robinson will have an uptick with Austin Eckler out. Cliff Kingsbury, he had the most passes behind the line of scrimmage in the NFL by 20% through 2 weeks. Like, we know what Cliff's offense is kind of like. We don't know what Jaden Daniels' legs look like in an NFL, on an NFL field at State Farm Stadium. Keeping him in front of you is a massive, massive task, and it's going to need to happen for the Cardinals to win. And then finally, time of possession. Like, even if the Cardinals turn the ball over, their offense is good enough to where they can recoup against Washington. Time of possession, they got bludgeoned last week. I think they were only on the field 24 minutes. It can't happen. With the defense that the Cardinals have, it can't happen. The offense needs to be on the field at least half the game.
Yeah, I mean, and it was the opposite against Buffalo Bills early, right? Like, they dominated the time of possession. And I think both of these teams kind of understand, right? The more our quarterback has the ball in his hands, the better off we're going to be. So this game, I mean, bro, this thing kicks off at, 4:05 Eastern, 1:05 local. I mean, I don't know. We might be out of there by 3 p.m. You know what I mean? And that's I'm hyperbolizing here, but this clock may just be running, and these guys we may have like 5 possessions per team. So it's going to be really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I look at this, and I look at the Washington Commanders, and I think that's absolutely what they're going to try to do is control the clock. And you're right, both sides of the ball, both defensive lines, pass rushing units, front sevens, however you want to describe them, have got to just be getting drilled through their head today. Do not run past the quarterback. Do not rush beyond the quarterback, because both of these quarterbacks will absolutely kill you. If you're looking at the backside of that quarterback because you ran past him, you're toast. And that could very well be the determining factor in this game, is which defensive pass rush loses discipline first.
Yeah, and then one key thing just to keep in the back of your mind, the Cardinals had a very, very difficult time getting off the field against Josh Allen on 3rd and longs. There were multiple 3rd and longs where Josh Allen just, nobody's open, tuck it, I'm gone. That's something that Jaden Daniels is more than capable of doing. The Cardinals getting off the field on 3rd down, especially when they put themselves in a situation to do just that, and then an elite quarterback has other ideas. That's something the Cardinals are absolutely going to have to do if they want to win this game.
Really exciting quarterback battle between Jaden Daniels and Kyler Murray. I'm personally really looking forward to that game. But for more on Alex, more on David, check them out over at Locked On Commanders for David and Locked On Cardinals for Alex, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Continuing along the 4:25, 4 o'clock window, the New England Patriots. They're a team that, again, might not necessarily be the one that you're expecting to go to the Super Bowl, but they do have some pieces despite their somewhat tough start to the season. The San Francisco 49ers are banged up in the worst way. So 2 teams hoping to get the better of one another. Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots and Eric Crocker and Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers get you ready for game time.
This is story time right here. Let's draw the picture of what a New England Patriots victory looks like, Michael. How did the Patriots come in, hand the 49ers their 3rd straight loss? Patriots improved to 2-2 to get back to 500 this year. What does that game look like to you?
Well, ideally, what the Patriots need to do is something they were completely unable to do on Thursday night against the Jets, and that is keep the game close. Don't fall behind early, because when this team does, they are not equipped to come from behind. So what they need to do is establish the run once again early. That's not an easy task against the San Francisco 49ers, who have a very good run defense, just 104 yards per game on the ground. If the Patriots are going to hope to find some cracks in that run defense, they have to get them in the yards per carry, where the Niners have been known to yield a little bit more in that category. I believe, according to the statistics I've seen, allowing 4.5 yards per carry right now. So that's where, again, Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson, maybe a combination of Jermichael Hasty and a practice squad call-up of Kevin Harris may help them to do so. If the Patriots can do that and keep the game close, they do have a puncher's chance at being able to take it to the 49ers here. They're also going to have to improve on what we saw defensively from the Patriots last week, and really started against the Seattle Seahawks a couple of weeks ago. They need to win the edge more than they lost it. And for the last couple of weeks, they have not done so. Keon White, number 99, their lead pass rusher, needs to be able to try to get home. That's a very tough task to do against this against the San Francisco offensive line, but the Patriots need to try to establish that if they are going to be competitive in this game. And then lastly, and it sounds very rudimentary and it sounds very basic, but the Patriots have to force turnovers. They need to start making their own opportunities, getting some plays, having things swing their way, and grabbing the momentum from the home team in the Bay Area. If they do all three of those, New England is going to make this close. I'm not going to go outright and say, oh, they'll win this game if they do all three, but they'll keep it close enough to make things interesting. If any one of those boxes isn't ticked, I don't think the Patriots come away with a victory in the Bay Area against the Niners this weekend. And if they don't come away with at least a couple of those ticked off, then it really could be another ugly night in store for the New England Patriots.
And then maybe we'll see McVay in week 5 if that happens.
I joked with Mike, prior to hitting record about how he popped on the stream and he looked so confident. And if I'm the New England Patriots heading to the 49ers, kind of seeing this team licking their wounds a little bit, I would be confident as well. I'd assume that Gerard Mayo and the coaching staff are talking to those guys saying, hey, we just got to play our game and do our job. This is a team that the 49ers, they have all these high expectations, is not quite the same team right now as they were heading into the season, with all these injuries that they're dealing with, banged up, a lot of uncertainty at certain spots. Let's play our brand of football. Let's play a clean game, protect our quarterback a little bit, and give us a shot to win this game on the road.
Yeah, you're right, Croc. It's a good time to play the 49ers right now. And a lot of the things we've said about this, it's like, okay, I think the 49ers are a better team. They can take advantage of this. Weak linebackers. Kyle Shanahan's going to put the linebackers in a blender. Niners, big favorites by more than a touchdown. We said all those things last week about the Los Angeles Rams, and the Niners went up 14-0, and it looked like, okay, it's going to be a cakewalk of a game, and they weren't able to close it out. So there are ways you can beat the 49ers right now, and they're still figuring out some things on defense with their new defensive coordinators. So you've got to take teams seriously in the NFL, and maybe it's only a bad week to play the 49ers if they figure those things out. Otherwise, it seems like this might be the best time to play the 49ers because they're figuring things out a little bit slow this year, and obviously have a lot of people banged up. Croc, what's the path to victory for the 49ers, though? What's that picture look like?
I guess it can be as simple as either not having Ronnie Bell on the field or having Ronnie Bell make sure that he catches the ball. And if he catches the ball late in that game, we might be viewing the 49ers a little differently, knowing that they're having injuries, but hey, you can overcome them and still win. Right now, it feels like the injuries have hurt them, and guys not really stepping up and making the play when it needs to be made. And whether it's special teams, we saw that. Mike came on here and said, hey, the Patriots, they lost in all three phases, offense, defense, special teams. Well, in the fourth quarter against the Rams, the 49ers lost all three phases, and it hurt them big time. So can you play a little bit cleaner game? And if so, then maybe like last week where it looked like the 49ers are going to run away with the game, maybe they can run away with one against the New England Patriots.
Mike, I like to ask the opposing hosts when we do these crossover episodes if there's a secret superstar player, and maybe superstar is a strong word, but a player that opposing fan bases might not know that much about. And I'm looking at like some of the young receivers, and I really liked the 4th round wide receiver in Javon Baker, and I'm wondering how Polk and those young receivers are developing there. Is there any secret superstar player that whether it's offense or defense, that 49ers fans might learn their name and know that name after Sunday. They don't really know right now. And for example, like for the 49ers is Juwan Jennings, but now he's not a secret because he broke out in a big way last week. Who's that guy for the Patriots?
Well, I think the name is somewhat known. It's very well known up here in New England, but it may not be known that well on the West Coast, and that's Demario Douglas, the Patriots' top receiver from 1 year ago. Demario is a shifty player, and he has the ability to win his matchups from pretty much anywhere on the field. He's most comfortable in the slot, but this kid can win his battles on the perimeter as well if he needs to. Demario is someone who has wanted to have the ball fed to him, especially over the first couple of weeks. Didn't see a whole lot of action in this passing game for obvious reasons, but the Patriots made a concerted effort to try to get him involved, and he delivered 7 catches, catching over 60 yards. Not going to illuminate the stat sheet, but considering what the Patriots offense looked like against the Jets, it was actually a pretty good showing. So I look for the Patriots to continue to try to feed Demario. He's your best playmaker. Give him the ball. Let him try to make things happen for you. That may be a name that Niners fans may want to remember. On the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Anthony Jennings is not someone that typically gets an awful lot of press because of the position he plays, but he is very key in being able to set an edge and also be able to set the tone both on run and pass defense. If the Patriots are winning their matchups there, it might be because Jennings is having a big game.
We're going to save our predictions for our Friday episodes here on Locked On 49ers and Locked On Patriots, respectively. But I do want to reference that 10-point line. 49ers 10-point favorites in this game as a 1-2 team. Mike, Croc, what do you guys think? Does that feel like it's a little bit too much with the way the 49ers have played the last 2 weeks?
It might be more about how the New England Patriots have played offensively. And it's been a little slow, and they'll see if they can get things going with Stevenson. If they can't run the ball early, then what does that look like? You're forced to pass the ball. They haven't been able to get pass protection. Maybe they assume that the 49ers are. You got Leonard Floyd, pay some money for him. You got Gross Models. You got Nick Bosa. Can those guys wreak havoc? And if so, then it'll be a long day for the New England Patriots offense. That's what I believe they are assuming with that point spread.
Yeah, I think Croc is right on the money. I think he's absolutely right. The Patriots right now on offense have not been able to establish it. And without being able to run the ball early, they run the risk of another anemic offensive output. Also remember, the San Francisco 49ers team right now may be struggling, but they are the defending NFC champions for a reason. There is tons of talent in all 3 phases. All they need is a get-right game to put it all together. They might find it this weekend against the New England Patriots.
Yeah, and then even for the Patriots, that week 1 win at the Bengals, it doesn't look as good as it did in week 1, right? Because now the Bengals are actually 0-3. And so it's like, oh man, even that game where you're like, oh, okay, this team's better than we thought coming into the year. And then you lose 2 straight and you realize, oh man, the Bengals might actually be trash. So maybe that wasn't that great of a win.
Mike, Brian, Croc, all great personalities, all great people, and all so knowledgeable about the game of football. So for more on Mike, check him out over at the Locked On Patriots podcast, and Brian and Crack, you can find him over at Locked On 49ers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 4:25 window, it's the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. Both teams tough losses in week 3. The Browns drop a almost gimme to the New York Giants, and then the Las Vegas Raiders coming off that big Baltimore win in week 2, lay an egg essentially against the Carolina Panthers. So Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns and your boy Q of Locked On Raiders talk about which team could bounce back in the bigger way.
Jeff Lloyd, host of Locked On Browns, your boy Q, host of Locked On Raiders. Crossover Thursday. We appreciate everybody who makes both shows your first listen every day. Become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Browns and Locked On Raiders YouTube pages. The shows are always available, always free wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to check out Locked On NFL. Tyler Rowand is always crazy, and the Titans are always 0-3. So sometimes I just mute it because I want to see his reactions. So imagine Tyler on the rest of the NFL. As his team is 0-3. Tony Wiggins, they don't come any better. So Tony Wiggins in the afternoon giving you his best reflection on the current NFL stories. Q, biggest path, biggest key to victory. What do you need to see from the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday?
Well, offensively, I need to see some rhythm. I really do. Like just finding any kind of rhythm. You know the drunk person at the wedding and the wedding rehearsal, and they're just dancing and they're feeling good about themselves. And hats off to them because they're having a good time, but they're totally off rhythm. They totally look like they're out of place. They look like they're fighting whoever they're dancing with. That's what the Raiders look like offensively right now. They look like the drunk guy at the wedding or the drunk girl at the wedding that has no rhythm because they're
Same dance, regardless of what the song is.
Right, exactly. They have no rhythm whatsoever. So they've got to find it, right? And normally I would say you've got to establish the run, you've got to open things up, but I don't care how they find their rhythm. I don't care if they've got to pass the ball 10 times to open up the game and eventually loosen things up, and maybe the run game could get going. We know that something has to be sprinkled in when it comes to the run game, but just find a way to get the ball to the playmakers, right? Find a way to get Devontae heavily involved. Brock Bowers heavily involved. Jacoby Myers heavily involved. Michael Mayer. I mean, they've got it's so frustrating because they've got the weapons and they just can't use them, right? It's almost like having that expensive car in the garage and like mom and dad's like, nope, you can't drive that till you get a license. It's like, wait, hold on. But it's right here. It's mine. Like it's so wild, man, that they just can't get it out there on the highway and let it rip. And I don't understand what it's going to take, but that's what it's going to take to win a game. They're going to have to get on a rhythm offensively, be able to sustain some drives. Like I said, get the run game going eventually. However you find a way to do it, I don't care. But the offense has got to look at something. We got to be able to look at it on Sunday, Jeff, and say, oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that offense has something there. Okay, there's a rhyme and reason to why Luke Getsy's calling this play. There's a rhyme and reason why they did this in the first quarter. They're setting up the fourth quarter. There's got to be something I can identify and say, okay, that makes sense. They had a sequence on Sunday against the Panthers where they got the ball at the 40 because of a terrible kickoff by Carolina. Then they have the very first play. They hit Devontae for 15 yards. They're already in Carolina's territory at the 45-yard line. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And then it's like 4th and 4, and they go for it, turnover on downs. Like, none of that made sense. You're already in plus territory, and you can't take advantage of it. Like, it makes sense. Makes sense. That's what they have to do. That's why I said that offense has to have a rhythm. Defensively, one, they've got to be able to get some pressure on Deshaun Watson, right? They let Andy Dalton have his way with them last week.
Rocket.
Yeah, and that surprised the mess out of me because, look, they did a really good job against Lamar Jackson for the most part. And then Andy Dalton, who's not going to run around the yard at all, who's not a threat like that, just sat back in the pocket, threw the ball around the yard, made some really nice passes. I got to give him credit for that, and just carved the Raiders defense up because they didn't get that much pressure on him. So they've got to find a way to get pressure on Deshaun Watson, make him uncomfortable. The offensive line, obviously, in Cleveland is not where it needs to be, and they've been giving up sacks, so take advantage. I don't care if it's Max Crosby or whoever. They've got to take advantage of that and get some pressure on the quarterback. And the final thing I'll say they need to do is create a couple turnovers. They got to get a couple turnovers, win the turnover battle. Every game so far this season, Gardner Minshew's thrown an interception. He's got to win the turnover battle. They can't do that, but they've got to be able to create a couple turnovers, whether it's a strip sack, an interception, a muff punt. I don't care. Again, I'm not begging. I'm not begging for a certain category, right? I'm not particular. Just create a couple turnovers, and you'll be in a really good position and protect home field in a crowd that's going to be probably a majority Browns fans, to be honest. I mean, I know how Cleveland Browns fans travel. I know a large contingency that's coming, and Allegiant Stadium is one that's housed a lot of opposing fans. So they're going to have to handle their business and try to quiet the crowd by their play on the field. But those are the three keys, man: rhythm on offense, pressure on defense, and create a couple turnovers, and they'll give themselves a chance to win the game. That doesn't guarantee they're going to win. It means they'll give themselves a chance. But on the flip side, for Cleveland to have an opportunity to go into Allegiant and pick up the victory and improve to 2-2, what has to happen in your eyes?
Well, no, look, and you talk about running the ball. Look, the Browns' most successful running play to this point was in Jacksonville, where everybody in the stadium thought Jameis Winston was going to sneak it on 4th and inches. No, they just ran a power with Jerome Ford. Jacksonville wasn't ready for it. It wasn't a great play. Jacksonville just got duped. So they have to, and this has always been a staple of the Stefanski offense. And even when the Stefanski offense has been so good, there's so many things that come off the play action and the boot game and the rollouts, because you want to know what? Everybody knows that run play is going to get 6-7 yards. So you're bringing people up, you're walking them up, and guess what? You back out of it, you roll out, there's a tight end wide open in the flats. They're not really getting anything from any tight end play right now. Tight ends have been huge through the Kevin Stefanski regime. Yes, I understand David Njoku is out. I screamed all year. You don't have enough because you only have David Njoku. God forbid, what would be the plan if you didn't have David Njoku? Turns out I was right. They had no plan after David Njoku. They've got to get balance within the wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper, both very good players, but it's all got to work in sync. Defensively, you just have to take away some of the big shots. It almost hurt him in Jacksonville. It certainly gave him some issues against the Cowboys. It certainly hurt him last week against the Giants. You can't get uber aggressive and just think you're going to get to the quarterback every single play. And right now they're lacking a little bit. Last year they got more pressure traditionally without having to bring extra guys. Just because you're not getting the pressure doesn't mean you necessarily have to bring more people, because that means there's less people to then cover, which has been a little bit of an issue to this point. Cover better, run the ball better, and just get better sync. Deshaun keeps talking about it, and let's see. Because otherwise, at 1-3 for a team that was supposedly supposed to have real aspirations to win the AFC North, there's going to be a lot of questions and possibly some changes. And then all of a sudden, now emotions get involved, and we all know the way that works within the NFL. Either way, looking forward to a great one. Raiders certainly hosting the Cleveland Browns. And you're right. Like, I can just tell from social media, there are a lot of Browns fans.
Oh, yeah.
It's number one, it's, hey, I've never been to Vegas. Oh, we can see the Browns while we're in Vegas.
Yeah.
So you find a way to appease both parties, probably. And maybe somebody doesn't want to go to the game of the relationship, but hey, we're going to Vegas anyway, so they're certainly going to go for the trip.
Jeff is great. Q is great. Both guys know a lot about their teams and a lot about the game of football in general. For more on Jeff and Q, check them out over at Locked On Browns and Locked On Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That rounds out the 4 o'clock window, but we have a lot of primetime matchups to dive into. 3 great ones. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So for one of the primetime matchups of the week, Ravens and Bills. Ravens open up as 2.5-point favorites in that game. So if you'd like that line for the Ravens, or if you'd like the underdog for the Bills, check that out over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. We return here, wrapping up the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here, getting you ready for game time across the league in week number 4. We had the Thursday night matchup between the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas comes out on top in that one. So that was the first primetime matchup of the week, but there are still 3 more really good ones to get to. Let's start off with Sunday Night Football. The Buffalo Bills, who are just steamrolling teams right now, travel to Baltimore to play the Ravens, who picked up a win over the Dallas Cowboys to improve the record to 1-2. So Joe Marino of Locked On Bills and myself, Kevin Oestreicher of Locked On Ravens, will dive into everything you need to know leading up to game time and which team can get the better of the other. We return on Crossover Thursday. Locked On Ravens, Locked On Bills, bringing everything you need to know before that Ravens and Bills Sunday night matchup. Just as a reminder, today's episode of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Bills, this Crossover Thursday, is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Man, Joe, I'm so pumped for this matchup. This has been a game that's been circled even just when that schedule release came out. Under the lights, 2 great quarterbacks, 2 great teams. But from your perspective on Buffalo's side, what are things they need to do to get the job done and pull it a win in Baltimore?
Kevin, I got 3 things written down. And number 1, I think you're going to do crossovers all year long. And if they don't say this first, then I don't know what they're watching. But you got to be ready to stop the run. Obviously, we talked about the potency of this Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson backfield and how successful it's been to this point. And I'm really interested to see how the Bills match up with personnel, because we know Baltimore's going to put multiple backs. They're going to put multiple tight ends on the field, right? They're going to play with big people. Well, the Bills don't play defense with big people at all. There's not been a snap this year that they've played with 3 linebackers on the field. They're 79% nickel. They're 21% dime. They are 5 or 6 DBs on the field, seemingly no matter what. And I know that Baltimore and Miami are different operations, right? Completely different. But they're similar in the fact that they both will put big people on the field. They both want to play multiple backs. They want to play multiple tight ends. Buffalo did not adjust their personnel for that. Now, listen, with Miami, I think you're more concerned with how they're going to push the ball vertically down the field. And so you might invite the run and say, hey, yeah, if you don't want to throw the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, go right ahead. We'll concede rushing yards. And the Bills played 75%, too high, middle of the field open coverage, and gave them light boxes on like 17 of 34 runs, like 6 or less in the box on 17 of 34 runs against Miami, and said, go ahead, run the ball if you want to. I don't know if they're going to do that against Baltimore, right? I think you're more concerned, with all due respect to the Baltimore passing game, you're more concerned with stopping the run game. And so do they adjust? Do they play with bigger people? Well, you'd love to play a third linebacker, but your top 2 are out. Matt Milano's out. Terrell Bernard's out. So the guys that would be the third linebacker, they're the 1 and 2 right now in Dorian Williams and Balin Spector. They're playing well in a fill-in role, but do you have a guy that you believe in to step in and be the third linebacker, or do you continue to play with small people and hope for the best? That's an interesting recipe. So be ready to stop the run, and you better be right in your approach on how to do it. Number 2, you got to test the pass defense. You just talked about it, right? Like, they're giving up yards. There's communication issues, guys that are in different spots that aren't maybe playing to where they're supposed to. You got to test it out. This isn't the game to go in and beat your head against the wall and live with a bunch of dirty runs. This is a Josh Allen throw the ball game, in my opinion. And the fact that you don't have Stephon Diggs as the go-to guy, and you do have this idea that everybody eats and you want to spread the ball around, I think that works to your favor in a situation where, all right, maybe they have some challenges with newness. Okay, well, take that to your advantage and know that you can throw the ball. I mean, Josh Allen threw the ball to 10 different players, right? They scored 6 touchdowns, 6 different players against Jacksonville. So take advantage of that and test them out. And then number 3, I know this is very generic. I got very specific with the first 2, but like, you got to be ready for a 4-quarter fight against Baltimore. The Bills, the game scripts got out of control against Miami and Jacksonville. Of course, they played a tighter game against Arizona after the Bills got down 17-3 in week 1, came back and was able to take care of their business. But this is not a game where I think you have any expectation that you're going to go in and have this massive lead and, you're playing your starters with 10 minutes, you're playing your backups with 10 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. And so you'd love to make Baltimore one-dimensional and say, hey, Lamar, you got to play a drop-back passing game and see if you can come back. You'd love to do it. I don't know if that's something you can go in with that expectation. Meanwhile, like, this is a narrative with Baltimore that they blow fourth quarter leads. So there's that dynamic that exists. And I mean, it happened against the last time these two teams played, that Baltimore kind of gave up a late lead in the game. So you got to be ready for a dogfight for 4 quarters and playing a unique opponent that presents completely different challenges than what you face to this point.
Yeah, and I honestly almost took the words exactly out of my mouth for the 3 keys, because for Baltimore, you have to take advantage of your personnel. And if Buffalo wasn't going to adjust and not put the heavier personnel out there and kind of roll with their heavy DB looks, which again, I think the trend over the first 3 weeks has been they're going to roll with it. Yeah. Well, you have Derrick Henry, and with Derrick Henry, I mean, it's tough to put him out there. And you're right, Miami's different, Jacksonville's different, Baltimore's different. But man, Derrick Henry's just a whole different beast in terms of like what it takes to bring him down. And for me, within that first key of running the ball, you also have to be able to open up rushing lanes and take advantage if you're an offense. Because what Baltimore has done is they've used imbalanced lines. They've used offensive line rotations. They do a bunch of stuff up front. You mentioned players like Patrick Ricard, heavy personnel, heavy sets. Those are all things Baltimore loves to work in. And so if Buffalo is being a bit lighter with their personnel, if you just bring in all these heavy guys and you say, all right, well, we're just going to go straight up with you, more often than not, you would assume at least the Baltimore would have success. And then does Buffalo adjust, and do they have the personnel to adjust, and will they? Are they willing to do it? That's one of the big keys for me. The second one is definitely going to be on the defensive side of the ball. And that is, make Buffalo one-dimensional. And obviously this is more so, can you stop James Cook and Josh Allen in the run game? Obviously, I don't think stop is the right word. It's more so contain with those two guys, but you don't want to worry as much about it. You want to make sure that you as a defense, if you can eliminate any part, Roquan talked about this before week 1, and it's a big point for any team. If you can stop the run or just make an offense one-dimensional in general, it eliminates a bunch of different factors you have to worry about. You talked about that with Isaiah Pacheco against the Chiefs, and you got to make sure, make Mahomes throw, essentially. You got a whole lot of flack and a whole lot of heat for that, considering the player Mahomes is. But the principle itself is, if you can take away an aspect of what an offense wants to do to your defense, it benefits you in so many different ways. And so the consistency there, and the third key with me is the consistency of the fourth quarter. This is a 60-minute fight. It's not 48 minutes. It's not 30 minutes. 4 quarters of play. The narrative is wide open for everybody. Everybody knows what it is with this Baltimore Ravens team. Doesn't matter if it's 14-10, 28-6, 31-17. The game's not over till it's over. And Lamar Jackson's been very vocal about the fact that he wants to just keep his foot on the gas and make sure that the team is done and that there's no doubt that they're winning. But the Ravens have gotten a little conservative with their play calling, both on offense and on defense, to kind of say, hey, let's get out of here with a win. And just that's come back to bite them. So in my opinion, they have to be able to play this game for 4 quarters and kind of do away with that narrative of what it has been. This is not just a one-off or a 2-off thing this season. This has been over the last handful of years, as you mentioned, Joe, back to the last time these two teams played. It's been there forever. So for me, I think this is going to be a close, hard-fought game. I think it's going to be a one-possession game. I think this is going to be a close one. Maybe poetically it comes down to the kicker battle between Justin Tucker and Tyler Bass. And Justin Tucker right now, 29th out of 29 qualified kickers in terms of field goal percentage, 62.5. So who knows? Maybe a Justin Tucker revenge in terms of getting back on track. But I think it's going to be a close one.
Probably. Interesting line, like you mentioned. I think Baltimore favored by 2.5.
Yeah.
Who knows, man? They'll play it and see what happens. But I think we did a good job of breaking down the key variables that'll sort this thing out when it's all said and done.
I think this could really be the game of the week. I think it's such a good matchup between two of the top AFC teams. And whoever comes out on top, I think it's going to be a hard-fought win for whoever it is. For more on Joe, check him out over at Locked On Bills. And if you want more Ravens coverage from me, check me out over at Locked On Ravens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. 2 Monday night games again this week. First one, the Tennessee Titans, who have had a very disappointing start to the season, and Will Levis in particular has had a very disappointing start. We're going to Miami to take on the Dolphins, who at this point it feels like it'll be Tyler Huntley, but no official word as of who will be the starting quarterback right now. But Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins will take you through all of the key things you need to know in whether the Dolphins or Titans will be able to come out on top.
All right, Tyler, I've talked enough. Give us 3 keys to victory for Tennessee in this game.
Well, I think number one, they need to run the football. So Miami's run defense has actually been one of the better run defenses in the NFL. I believe they're top 12, top 13, like 112 yards allowed per game. But the Titans only ran the ball 11 times for 33 yards last week. And with how bad the pass protection is, that simply isn't good enough. Now, a lot of that had to do with game flow and the game script with the Packers getting up quite a bit. But this is a Brian Callahan thing. To me, this is a guy who is a pass-heavy guy. That's where he feels comfortable. And when things get kind of sketchy, he wants to go back to his comfort blanket, the quick timing passing game. The problem is you don't have Joe Burrow. You have Will Levis. And Levis has showed that he is much more comfortable in the play-action pass game. And I know that there are studies out there that show that you don't really need the run game to be successful to have success in play action.
It's nonsense.
But to me, it's not just a setting up the play action pass. It's putting your offensive line in less situations where it's just a pure drop back passing game. So the Titans have to find a way to run the football far better than they have in the second half of the first 2 games. Mm-hmm. And then in the full game last week, they have to be able to run the football better, not only because you look around the NFL, the run game is back. And Kyle, I know you're somebody who pays attention to not just what your team is doing, but NFL trends. And if you look with all the 2 high safety shells, people are looking to run the ball more. That's how you attack. And people are going to keep 2 safeties back deep. So I think the Titans have to run the football with more success. Also, on defense, they got to find a way to get pressure. You're playing against backup quarterbacks, and last week you didn't make Malik Willis work for it at all. He had a lot of clean pockets, and they gave up a lot of 3rd and longs, like I mentioned before, because they simply could not get pressure on the quarterback, something that I was worried about all season with Arden Key as a starter. Arden Key is not a starting edge in the NFL, and the Titans have not gotten enough interior pressure from Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat, like everybody in training camp and preseason said that they would. So the Titans have to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback, especially a backup quarterback, to make those mistakes happen. The Titans have not forced a turnover through 3 games, and the Denard Wilson defense is built on getting turnovers. That's what we've been told all season long. So you're not going to get turnovers if you don't get pressure on the quarterback. And quite frankly, I think the Titans need to blitz more. We heard from Denard Wilson that
Greg Williams and Todd Bowles are my big influences and stuff like that. Okay, well, those guys are blitz heavy guys, and the Titans are not in the top 10 in blitz percentage. The Dolphins blitz more than the Titans. The Titans have only blitzed 26.4%. So I think Denard Wilson needs to wake up and realize that his front four pass rushers are not going to get pressure on their own, and they need to dial up pressure and blitzes on third downs to try to get to the quarterback more. And then finally, I keep saying this. It's kind of a running joke on my keys to victory that I keep saying this exact thing, but no big mistakes, please. No punt blocks, no stupid penalties that turn into points for the other offense, no pick sixes, no fumbles. The Titans just have to play a clean game. It's kind of crazy that the Titans have given up 25 points off turnovers. And if you count the punt block that went for a touchdown against Chicago, that's 31. And the Titans' margin of defeat right now is 30 points. There's your points. There's your margin. It's the turnover. So they got to be able to run the football. They got to be able to get pressure on the quarterback, and they can't have any silly, stupid turnovers. And if they do those, they should be a better team than this version of the Miami Dolphins. And if they don't do those things, they're going to find themselves at 0-4, and the season is truly over by the bye week.
Yeah. And for Miami, I think the biggest thing for me, and I mentioned situational red zone stuff last week against Seattle and said, well, your metrics, your scoring offensively, when you get into the red zone, it's not good. And then defensively, when other teams get into the red zone, it's really bad. And it got even worse. The Dolphins got inside the 10-yard line twice, came away with 3 points against Seattle. So if you get short fields, if they give you short fields, if you have a tip ball for an interception that starts on the 7-yard line, like what you dealt with this past week against Seattle, those have to be touchdowns, right? The Dolphins, 25% of their trips into the red zone have yielded touchdowns. They're 2 of 8 through 3 games. Defensively, 6 out of 7 opponent trips into the red zone have yielded touchdowns. That is 31st and 30th in the NFL. It could not be worse for you once you get into the red area. And that's where you look at potentially a quarterback that has some run game threat with Mike McDaniel and his background going back to Washington with RG3. And can you tap into those roots and get that extra hat in the run game? They're having a really hard time getting outside. They are averaging less than 2.7 yards per carry off the left and right end this season. All other gaps, it's over 4.4 yards per carry. But
that'll be extra interesting. Because the Titans are really good on the interior, but have sloppy edge play. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's another key one for Miami is getting the outside run game going. Whether that's Devon Achane, who has the dominant workload for you thus far. Jalen Wright looked really good in a couple of carries the past 2 weeks, but hasn't got a lot of volume as a rookie. How can you ignite that spark to get outside and get on the edge and test Tennessee's ability to tackle? You mentioned some of the tackling from this past week. That's a big thing. You've got speed. You've got playmakers. They like to run these perimeter screens. Jalen Waddle stopping and cutting back into the backs of his blockers instead of just getting north and trying to force a tackle and challenge somebody with an angle and trying to run through it. He's trying to find more green grass. So that's another one for Miami is finding the winning plays on the perimeter have not been there. Even if it's the running game, if it's the screen game, if it's quarterback run game, whatever it looks like. The Dolphins have to get that going. And I would say their early down success is especially critical. They kind of turned their nose up at it. This past week against Seattle, they had those successes running the ball between the tackles, and then they got away from it. And there were some negative plays on the outside, and then you're in 3rd and longs with backup quarterback play. Tyler, the Dolphins were 1 of 15 on 3rd and 4th down combined against Seattle. They're at 32% for the season on 3rd and 4th down combined. They're 1 of 10 on 4th down in 3 games. You got to get those short situations and give yourself as big of a menu as you possibly can to call plays that give you a chance to convert those and convert that into continuing to possess the football. If the Dolphins can do those things, you're going to give yourself a chance to win a football game that's probably going to be a low-scoring, tight to the vest game. But if not, then that's going to feed more into Tennessee's pathway to victory as well.
Well, we're looking at 2 teams that are definitely desperate for a win to keep their season alive. And I think that you're going to see that desperation in the play calling. personally. I think we're going to see both these teams literally pulling out everything they can to try to get this win.
Both Tyler and Kyle know so much about their teams. They're extremely knowledgeable. And if you want more Titans coverage, more Dolphins coverage, check both those guys out. Tyler at Locked On Titans and Kyle over at Locked On Dolphins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Rounding it out here on the Ultimate NFL pregame show, the final Monday night matchup. The Seattle Seahawks under new coach Mike Macdonald, 3-0, an incredible start for the former Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator, and the Detroit Lions coming off of their NFC Championship loss. Still trying to find their way. I've dealt with a couple of injuries as well. So Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks and Matt Derry of Locked On Lions round out the week here with plenty of key matchup storylines and more for the Seattle Seahawks and Detroit Lions.
Corbin Smith, Locked On Seahawks. Matt Derry, Locked On Lions. It's our Thursday crossover brought to you by PrizePicks. Corbin, give me some keys here. What's it going to take for the Seahawks to get this thing done Monday night?
Well, the first key, look, I don't want to, go for the low hanging fruit here, but you better have some people chipping on Aiden Hutchinson. That is the number one thing, especially with Marcus Davenport being out. This feels like a game where if the Seahawks can find a way to at least somewhat contain Hutchinson, he's going to make his plays, but can you find a way to get a tight end chipping, running back chipping, both of them chipping, max protect, give Geno Smith enough time that he can get the ball to his receivers. This will be the best trio of receivers that the Lions have faced this year. So they're going to have to deal with DK, who is having a career year. Jack Smith and Jigba had 100-plus yards, 12 catches a couple weeks ago. Tyler Lockett is still Tyler Lockett. Maybe not the prime Tyler Lockett, but still a very good player. Noah Fant had 6 catches for 60 yards last week. But Seattle's got weapons after an offense. It's going to matter if Aiden Hutchinson's getting in the backfield every single play. So they've got to be able to do that. And I think getting the run game going also was a way to slow him down a little bit. Seattle actually has had over 100 rushing yards in 2 of the last 3 games, despite a lot of issues with their offensive line. If they have Ken Walker, the third back, to go with Zach Charbonnet, thunder and lightning combination, that can take some pressure off of that pass rush on Geno Smith too. Maybe open up some play action, which they haven't ran a lot this year. And then on the defensive side of the football, to me, it all boils down to turnovers. And I know that may seem elementary, but what has been one of the big difference makers the last 2 times these teams have met? 2 years ago, Reek Woolen, pick 6 on Jared Goff. Last year, Trey Brown, pick 6. Those immediate plays, and I'm not saying they need another pick 6, but they've got to find a way to fluster Jared Goff, get him uncomfortable, force him to be Vanilla Vic. I think Mike Macdonald would love that if they get him moving around some, and force him into some rough decisions. He has made some peculiar decisions with the football early this season at times for a veteran quarterback. Can you speed up that clock for him a little bit? I think this is the game the Seahawks are going to mix in some more of those simulated pressures, because Mike Macdonald's not done much of that the first 3 weeks, which has been stunning to me. Some of it hasn't had to because the pass rush up front's been so good. But I think you're going to see a little bit more exotic scheming this week from Mike Macdonald against a really good Lions offense. Can you do that to coax Jared Goff into a turnover or 2? To me, that could be the difference in a game that I expect is going to be very tight.
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of great points there. It's interesting with Goff. One of the things for the Lions, they've got to stay with who they are. I know this past Sunday against Arizona, Cardinals didn't have a great run defense last year. Their numbers were a little bit up the first couple of weeks, but they just went back to ground and pound. They went to David Montgomery. And what's really been interesting is taking place now, 2 of the first 3 games, Montgomery hits the hole, he hits the first defender. These Lion offensive linemen immediately run to him and start pushing him forward. There was one play this past Sunday in Arizona. They lifted him in the air for 4 yards. Well, until the whistles blow, you're good to go. So the Lions need to keep doing that, because that also will keep Geno Smith off the field, because like you said, his second home is Ford Field for some strange reason. So keeping with where they're at, their identity of running the football and doing it successfully is going to be important for the Lions. You mentioned the turnovers before. I agree with that. The 2 pick 6s the last 2 years. Jared Goff has got to take better care of the football. He was better this past Sunday in Arizona. Flipping the field, man, loud crowd Monday night. They've been partying all day to get to this point at 8:15 Eastern time. Jack Fox has been unbelievable as the Lions punter the last few weeks, flipping the field and making, whether it's Kyler Murray, whether it was Baker Mayfield, Stafford in week 1, make them go 90 yards, 92 yards. I know with these new silly kickoff rules and everything else, we're starting everything at the 30, 35 or whatever, but How about a long field for Geno as opposed to last year where a couple times, like with the turnovers and even 2 years ago, he had some short fields. And the final thing is getting some pressure on him. I mean, my goodness, he picked the Lions apart. You mentioned the Seahawks weapons. DK's been there now a while. Same with Tyler Lockett. Get some pressure on him. He cannot get comfortable there early. And it's got to be somebody, Hutchinson, they'll chip and they'll double team, but a DJ Reader on the interior, Liam McNeil, if he's healthy, could spell some doom for Smith and force him to just get uncomfortable because the last 2 years he has just been way too comfortable in there.
Yeah, let's get to the predictions, shall we? And you, I'm assuming, do the same way I do. I don't give score predictions on Thursday, but I look at the spread thanks to our friends over at FanDuel, and the Lions being at home, they get some home cooking from the odds makers. The Seahawks have the better record coming in, but again, there's a lot of people, and I get it to an extent. Who have you beaten to this point?
Yeah,
this is that litmus test for the Seahawks, but the Lions are still favored at home on Monday Night Football. Do you expect to see them cover in this game or not?
You said the number, as you and I are talking right now, is what?
I believe it's 4.5.
It's going to be close. I think the Lion fans, Corbin, are ready for, I'm not saying a blowout, but they're ready to see the Lions of old. I mean, even last Sunday against Arizona, they should have won that game going away, and they didn't. They won by 7. They were the better team. The Rams win, needed overtime. The Tampa game came down to the end. I think they're hoping that, hey, look, Seattle's 3-0 and playing well and well coached and well drilled, but it's time for the Lions to do what people thought they were going to do at the start of the year, and that is play championship caliber and NFC championship and Super Bowl caliber offense and really flex and get St. Brown going, get J-Mo going, Laporta, and put up a lot of points, but not have to win 48-45 or whatever. So, I like the Lions in this game. To cover the 4.5 is going to be tough because I do think for some reason Geno has a good feel there. And if Ragnow doesn't play, that does change things. Well, that'll likely come down to game time. But sure, I'll say the Lions will cover and win. I mean, Seattle, you guys have faced Jacoby Brissett, Bo Nix, heck, Ross Jackson should have quarterbacked the Miami Dolphins. That's an inside bit. Our friend, the host of Locked On Saints, that runs our network, it's not that you're going to see a real quarterback this week. But you've had his number. So what do you think?
I think 4.5 the Seahawks are going to cover. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win the game. I think that this is going to be one of those classic ones that goes down to the wire. And I'm going to go as far as saying whoever has the ball last is going to win this game. I don't think it's going to be the track meet we've seen the last 2 years. Mike McDonald will have an aneurysm if that happens. Like, Mike McDonald is not going to allow his defense to give up 40-plus points. Like, I'm not expecting that kind of a game. But I think late, whoever's got the ball last, I expect it's going to be tied or it's going to be within 3 points. And whoever has the ball last is going to have a chance to go down and win the football game. So I think as far as 4.5 points, being an underdog, I think the Seahawks are going to cover that. The question for tomorrow on Locked On Seahawks is, are they covering it in losing fashion or are they covering it pulling off the road upset? And that's what always makes the Friday episodes the most fun here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Really great primetime matchups this week, and I think it's very poetic that the Lions and Seahawks will round this thing out. Could be a really, really good game here. I'm honestly expecting it to be. And for more on Corbin, more on Matt, check them out over at Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Lions, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. Again, we take you through all of the games across the league leading up to Sunday and give you the key predictions, the storylines, and so much more from our local experts across our network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up next week, we'll be back here for week 5, bye week startup, and it'll be less games, but obviously rest is really important for these teams. So teams will have to start taking advantage of those bye weeks, but be sure to subscribe, follow along wherever you get your podcasts here. And for all of our local experts, if you want more coverage team specific, we have you covered also nationally. Plenty of coverage here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Enjoy your Sunday, enjoy the games, and I'll see you right back here next week on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show.